Hey everybody, this is Cameron from Noxious Anonymous. Welcome to a very special episode of Twin Peaks Thought of the Day for Sunday, October 23rd. Hey everybody, this is Cameron from Noxious Anonymous. 2016. Welcome to a very Sorry about that. I had some sound problems right now. Anyway, like I said, welcome to a very special episode. We are going to be discussing Mark Frost's book, The Secret History of Twin Peaks. We will be discussing the book in its entirety. I was thinking about how to discuss this book at first. I was thinking maybe we should do it by chapters, but then there's no chapters, and then by pages, but some pages have more info than other pages. So I think today we're just going to discuss the book as a whole right now with a few of my guests today. There will be other people joining us hopefully later in the conversation, but right now it is just us five. Obviously there's me. We also have Debbie with us. We have Joe, we have James, and we have Lost in the Movies, Joel Bacco with us. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
And so everyone get your book out of The Secret History of Twin Peaks, and we are going to be discussing that. All right, so why don't we start, James, let's start with your overall impressions of the book.
My first impression was that it was reasonably heavy when I dropped it on my foot this morning, and but in terms of the actual content, I will say I'm pretty much kind of a bit overwhelmed by it in terms of, what the hell has this got to do with anything? Why did Mark Frost decide to put a page from the Bible, Ezekiel, in there, and things like that, and also I was pleased to see that he used pictures of, for instance, Russ Tamblyn here when he was young. That's not from the making of Twin Peaks, unless he aged very quickly whilst making the pilot or something due to the stress of the production, but when he was having to finger the tie, that scene was apparently very hard to make. But overall, interesting as a whole, but at the same time, sort of like, an alienating feeling, like, it's a long way away from The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer or Cooper's My Life, My Tapes, etc. And it feels too many questions almost for me to properly understand the book. But having basically skimmed through it all, I like the ending. I like the overall direction it goes in, the sort of integral events of the series in a sort of quite brief fashion, but the way it pays attention to them seems sort of respectful in a way. And I can understand why Frost chose to sort of not just make a book about further mysteries of, Agent Cooper and his, further discoveries about the Laura Palmer mystery and things like that. And I can understand the thinking behind this. And then, I'm not even mentioning then all the other mysteries in the book in terms of the fact that things don't really match up. There's just too many things which seem kind of plain odd. For me, it's just like, as soon as I see Twin Peaks Press, I was just sort of, what? This is, when the show came out, they had, for which you could actually order, and I got one of them one time, sent from America, and it was called the Twin Peaks Gazette. I mean, it just doesn't add up. It's like there's something going on here. There is something wrong to get a saying from Milford, the brother of Dougie, who Dougie is the main focus in a way that much of the stories come through, even though we don't really know about their characters. But it really isn't about just what these people do on a daily basis, like with Dale and Laura's diaries, etc. It's completely different from that. All that's as good as I could expect it, if not better, actually. But at the same time, I must say I'm pretty confused, and I really don't understand the book as a whole.
Debbie, what do you think of the book?
I've spent all day reading it. There's still about 50 pages that I've not been able to cover, but I think I've got most of it down. I think, like James is saying, it's a lot of information. It took me a good 50 to 100 pages to try and get even into that kind of frame of mind of reading a big dossier like that. It's not like when you picked up Laura's diary and you kind of enjoyed every single word, and it was just like, we used to lend that book out to all my friends because it was entertaining. It wasn't really an entertaining read, if that makes sense, and it's hard to know which bits of the information are actually relevant. Like in kind of modern, this kind of truther movement where they kind of take series from all over the place. So you've got ancient Indians there, you've got UFOs, you've got all this kind of stuff that they try and throw into a melting pot to try and boil down to the same thing, really. And that's what it comes to at the end, doesn't it, when there's this chat about how whatever you call these beings or wherever they come from or how humans have described them through time, they're tying that back into the events that happen in the Twin Peaks that we know. Does that make sense?
Totally. Joe.
Yeah, but I think that...
Go ahead, James.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Well, I was just going to say to Debbie, it's like when it goes into things like JFK, 1963, I'm sort of like really lost, like moving towards what happened Teresa Banks or Laura Palmer. I mean, is there some thread that I'm missing between that? Is it because basically Mark Frost is drawing a parallel between different conspiracy theories, and then we end up with this conspiracy theory that Bob killed Laura and Teresa and all that kind of thing, made, and so it's sort of tracing the way we try and fabricate stories to make things more, rather than just facing it basically, Leyland was a sick individual, and that's it.
All right. Hang on, Joel.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, everybody. I have to speak in this very Twin Peaksian way. So I just thought it's funny that the ring that Teresa and Laura were wearing in Fire Walk with Me was once worn by Richard Nixon. That's kind of an interesting twist to the mythology, but we'll get to that eventually. When you were talking about how it tied into these different things, and the Kennedy stuff, that came to mind. I mean, who would have thought watching that movie they'd find this little green ring on a dirt mound under a trailer, and that was Richard Nixon's ring.
Joe, what did you think of the book so far?
From most of what I read, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, really. I mean, the UFO stuff, they're kind of going at an Ancient Aliens kind of vibe all of a sudden in a lot of it. That's what I thought. The old stuff with Jefferson and Lewis and Clark. I just don't know where he's going with all of this. I mean, was this really necessary? I mean, is this just for Frost to sell a book because the Twin Peaks' name is on it? I mean, I understand he feels like passionate about it probably, but I mean, when you're talking about like Kenneth Arnold and Roswell, well, what does this have to do with Twin Peaks? After seeing Fire Walk with Me, we're led to believe that there's more of an extra dimensional spiritual thing going on, not an alien thing. So I don't know. I mean, is this why Frost and Lynch have different views? How much input did Lynch have on this?
Zero.
I mean, how is this going to tie into the show when you have David Lynch who's directing each and every single moment of the show? It's not going to be like Frost. I don't know what to make of it. I like some of it. I think it's well written. I like the design of the book. The whole dossier kind of aspect of it, I think, is really cool. It obviously took a lot of money to make this book in general. I don't know how I feel about it. I did like there was some. I was talking to James earlier about it yesterday, I believe. That I don't know if you noticed, but there's little like lines in it that are direct quotes that were in the show.
Right.
Did you notice that? I thought that was kind of cool, but I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. What this is necessary for, I don't know. I really don't even know if it's going to be necessary.
Okay. Joel, you are a Twin Peaks expert on YouTube. Many people love your videos. So you just finished the book. Tell us how you feel about it.
Is that Gordon Cole on that line?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I just finished it this morning. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I find it kind of fascinating how it doesn't just sort of tell us maybe where the new show is going and all of that, but I always like to kind of look at the meta stuff with Twin Peaks, like how it's created and what Lynch and Frost think about it. And this just really clarified a lot of stuff that really, I feel like we already suspected about how Frost sees Twin Peaks and kind of what his vision of it is. And so I thought that was really interesting. Like a lot of stuff that felt almost like educated guesswork for years. Like, well, Frost was the one who brought in UFOs. Frost wasn't as interested in sort of the Lynch motifs of like Red Room, this and that, and all. And Frost was more interested in the town than Laura. And this just like pretty much flat out confirms every supposition we had about that. Like it's which I thought was really interesting.
When
one person
I was just going to say that when Dana Ashbrook was promoting Fire Walk with Me, I remember reading a magazine where he said, we're finally going back to Laura's story and not dealing with all this UFO shit. And now when you go to this book, it's 75% UFO shit. So.
Which I enjoy. I never really watched X-Files, but I was like a kid who was like obsessed with like the idea of it. So I have, just on its own merits, even aside from Twin Peaks, I kind of had a blast reading it. But one person that I really want to hear their take on eventually is Martha Nachemson, because she says in her book, she basically speculates Frost wanted it to go in a UFO direction, and she interviewed Catherine Coulson. Catherine Coulson was like, Lynch really doesn't like that, and he didn't want it. But it was sort of vague. Like, it sounded like she was sort of piecing together an idea. But now this shows, oh no, like he is really interested in UFOs in a way that Lynch doesn't seem to be. I will say, it looks like in the end, he gets to sort of have his cake and eat it too, because he spends a lot of time digging into UFO lore, but he still comes back to that Twin Peaks point of, well, we don't know what they are, but there's definitely something on Earth going on here that's not really extraterrestrial. And they really confirmed that in the last few pages, where they're talking about, whatever it is has probably been here longer than us, and it may come from another dimension and stuff like that. So I almost get the sense that Frost knows Twin Peaks can't really be an alien UFO story, but he wants to take it as close to that edge as he can and sort of get his kicks in before reining it in and being like, but it's really about the spirits of the woods. But I also thought it was really interesting to see what he took from Fire Walk with Me. And really, it kind of, he mentions the Jeffrey stuff, he mentions the Fat Trout, and obviously Carl Rod in there. But the one thing that's he really seemed to love about Fire Walk with Me was the ring. There's no Garbangosia whatsoever in this. No Judy.
No animal life.
But the ring is all over it. So clearly that was something that really resonated with him, even if he wasn't a big fan of the movie overall. When they went back to look at it, it looks like he said, oh, that ring, that's something you can work with, and just loves it and worked the hell out of it. Jack Parsons, Richard Nixon, and then ends up in Fat Trout Trailer Park. Like the Forrest Gump feather of Twin Peaks stuff.
Well, didn't it surprise you that Doug or Dwayne Milford, I can't remember which one off the top of my head, had a prior, or Major Briggs over, right? They had a prior relationship with Gordon Cole.
Dougie is the one.
Dougie.
Gordon Cole was in the mix, sure.
Dwayne stayed in town.
Him and Jeffries came to Twin Peaks in like the 70s, I think, or early 80s. They were investigating the whole facility that they built up on the mountain.
Investigating the pies and coffee.
And it was a Star Wars SDI installment. But so they were basically running cover.
Right.
For what was actually going on.
All right. So before I get to how I feel about the book, why don't you guys just discuss some of the things you guys want to while we're waiting for other people to come and join the chat? So whoever wants
I'd like to. Did anyone, James? Did you show Cameron the picture with the ring on Dougie Milford in the show?
Yeah. I mean,
heard about that.
I suspect a lot of people would think that is just either by chance, you know, like a. I mean, plausibly, when you think about it, it was spotted that Cooper's carpet that he was lying on when he was shot. This is by Christian Hartelman. He mentions that carpet is the same one that you see underneath Teresa when she's killed by Leyland.
Yeah.
So it's like, did Lynch just have kind of all of the different props left over from the show, you know, just by coincidence, really? Or he thought, well, it's a good idea to put Teresa on the same rug that Cooper.
Hey, Cameron,
you know.
I'm going to have to get going because I got to get back to work, but I will watch the rest of this, and I'm going to finish the book tonight as well. It was nice being on here. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
James, stay classy. Joel,
Joe, just
Debbie, Nevin, just nice to meet you.
Joe, just let Brian out of the trunk now, okay?
I have him whittling some wood in the back of the furniture store.
Okay.
It's now above the furniture store, not the convenience store.
Okay.
And it's Bob's. It's called Bob's Furniture, which I find ironic.
Just want to let you know, James, that
it's a terrifying question to contemplate.
Raymond in the chat wants to say he's watching this podcast on a 55-inch smart TV right now, and seeing James the douche waffle is quite a horror.
Right.
Live feedback.
Well, I'm glad I can give people the pleasure they need, really, in life. That's what I'm here for,
I kind of wanted to hear what people thought about the contradictions that are in the book, between the show and the book. Obviously, some things that changed. Do you think there's like an explanation, or do you think they're just straight out retconning it, or what?
Well, there's all this talk about alternate timelines, and one thing that I've always maintained is if you're going to do an alternate timeline, let's say like the last season of Lost, right, where you're going to do a flash sideways type of thing, then you better hope that the new viewers of Twin Peaks already knows the first and second season inside and out for you to be able to notice the differences. But since a lot of the people coming in are going to be new viewers, I don't understand the idea of exploring alternate timelines if the new viewers aren't even going to get the subtleties of it.
Well, here's a weird one. Oh.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I was going to say, here's a weird one. You're talking about discrepancies, right? So I was bearing that in mind when I was reading it, because I heard that there was going to be some timeline issues, but there's some really odd things in there. Like, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, but Dr. Jacoby's wife in the series was Leilani, but that's the name of his mother in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of thing. It's like as if somebody knew
that
the...
kind of like really, really tiny little things that only if you really knew the series inside out you would notice.
But it's more as if like things have got jumbled about and made into a nonsense rather than, and it's like as if things have become hidden to make things a mystery rather than just, you know, there was a multiple dimension where, you know, Agent Cooper in Doctor Who mode went back in time to save Annie. I mean, I can't really see Lynch and Frost going down that kind of road of let's go back in time and get Annie out of the in time so that she doesn't end up coming to Twin Peaks and doesn't end up getting injured or whatever happened to her. And then, you know, after the series ended, maybe something bad happened to her and they're trying to prevent that by traveling around in time in Glastonbury Grove. I mean, the show was not primarily a science fiction kind of escapade. So the way I see it is it's more likely could be something to do with the Black Lodge, like affecting things in some way where the documents become muddled and
maybe because Cooper as Bob is so, you know, just threw the whole universe out of whack. Yeah,
something like that. I mean, they're saying that we're going to get like a nuclear explosion going off in this episode, these new episodes in the desert, presumably. And I mean, but how could that be happening in the present day? Is that presumably back when nuclear testing started and then this is tied in with the idea of UFOs, and people were seeing the effects of radiation rather than.
Well, do we think that
fly
any of
through the air,
I mean, do we think that all this, like, it's basically this textbook of history here? I mean, do we think that there's going to be? I mean, do you think this is just peripheral?
Yeah.
Or do you think we're really going to like have like flashbacks to olden times in Twin Peaks in this new season?
I think if we have flashbacks, I don't think it's going to be as obvious as like stuff in the book. I really think he wrote this sort of as a little bit of a lark, like the stuff that he's interested in and what he could tie into Twin Peaks. Well, also, leading us toward where the new show is going to go. But I really don't think 90% of it is going to play into the show at all.
Okay,
That's my guess. It will piss some people off, but I don't mind it.
What do you think about Hank Jennings being killed off screen in a book with a goodbye note when he's on the audiobook reading? I mean, why would you kill off a character like that?
Right?
And then have the character read his goodbye note. That's kind of ridiculous.
I think
and then he's at the UK festival, back from the dead.
They're playing characters that they weren't on the show. Like, I think David Patrick Kelly is voicing Gordon Cole.
He is at the start, yeah. I don't know.
So Philippe in the chat says there's a possibility that the dossier was stolen by somebody. We don't know who had it before it was found. My thing about that is I know Mark Frost says, everything will be revealed in time, and I'm sure it will. And I'm sure it will negate several of our discussion points today, but this is where we are today. I just don't understand what the point is of going in and changing Norma's mom's name and changing Hank and Nadine's backstory. How does that affect like any big conspiracy thing? It doesn't. I don't get it. Like, why change the little details?
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to accept it as straightforward and just realize, okay, there's contradictions, they change things. That, to me, is easier to deal with than trying to sort of rationalize everything and say, oh, no, this is an alternate universe where Ed met Nadine 15 years later. Because, like you said, that's not relevant to anything. Like, I would look forward to there being an alternate universe somehow in the new show. I think that could be really fun, but it has to have meaning. And just arbitrarily changing certain things has no meaning or impact. So,
I don't think there's a literal alternate universe.
Ed told a fictional story on the show for some reason to make Nadine sound like he'd been around longer because he felt guilty, or I'd come up with a psychological explanation like that before something else.
Well, James, I'm sorry. Hang on a second, Debbie. People are saying in the chat that they think you're sitting in the red room with those drapes behind you. And Kamari Vosa says that he thinks the dossier was filled with to erase Annie from any historical, just a...
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely a lot of it. It doesn't mean that everything has to be a double, a double, triple, quadruple dimension where people are all running around chasing each other through different timelines, and because we've already got like a twinning of Twin Peaks Lodge, which as you said before,
and Deer Meadow.
I'm talking about there is that as well, but I'm talking about in terms of more otherworldly, like the Black Lodge is never actually referred to in the book, is it? It never says anything about the Black Lodge. It refers to Red.
Go ahead, Debbie.
It mentions it in one place, but just around Aleister Crowley when it's talking about the Black.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. The Black and White Lodges. Yeah, sorry, and there is a mention of even the very, very early part, someone seeing statuary and the color red and things like this, and it says fire that does not burn, but it's so there's even the kind of fire walk with me thing mentioned in there if you look for it, but. I think that the Black Lodge it's like in the show, it has this kind of effect on things. And I mean, I don't know if we're going to get Back to the Future Part 2 or whatever, this kind of people just fading away from photographs or coming back, like Annie fading out of the photograph. More Twin Peaks-ish than sort of, Doctor Who type of things. I mean, look at Lost Highway. We get the double women there, and then really there's only one in the end. So, we might get Heather Graham turning up playing a completely different character now in this new show. It'll just be, and this, I think that's more like the kind of mind-bending thing, even though she's not on the cast list. I think that Hank Jennings will definitely be back in the show, because I don't buy that whole note of him being stabbed in jail by one of the Renault brothers. It just seems like somebody's trying to trick somebody else, and that's what the whole book is about. On some level, it's like an element of trickery.
Joel's not buying that. Go ahead, Joel.
I mean, well, first of all, with Hank, I don't think he's going to be there, and I think it might be because him and Peggy Lipton had that run-in. They've talked, that she's talked about on USC and stuff like that, where he was like too rough with her in a scene. He didn't give her a warning beforehand, and there was a lot of bad feelings afterwards. I mean, I don't know if that's the only reason or whatever, but
25 years later, Peggy Lipton is like, don't get Mookie. He grabbed me and held me against some iron bars on a set once.
But it's
because I'm borderline anorexic, it hurt me a little bit. I mean, come on.
She didn't even bring it up until like 20 years later. So
I mean,
it seems like
frankly, I would rather have Chris Mulkey in the show than Peggy Lipton going on, most of her acting in the show. And that's no offense, but she was an absolutely dreadful actress.
Wow. Okay.
Peggy Lipton? Really?
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. She was embarrassing in some scenes. She's getting the
back for that.
pots. She can't even put pots in a plate. It's obvious stuff like Quincy Jones coming round, looking after her and stuff. And, just sort of like, Shelley here. Oh, there's a letter here. Oh, like the way she picks it up and gives it to Shelley, it's really bad. Just the way she moves her arm, the acting is really bad.
Philippe in the chat says, there's a fire demon supposedly being conjured by Jack Parsons. Could that be Bob?
Well, I think when you read that section of it, it talks about him obviously losing his arm. So Jack Parsons loses his arm. That's
you're right about that. I thought, yeah.
And then the neighbors find lots of hypodermic needles round about him. And obviously, I just immediately thought of.
Well, did that happen in real life? Did Jack Parsons really lose his arm?
Yeah, I don't know if he lost.
No idea.
But they did find needles and stuff. I would recommend that.
Because he can't just invent whole stories for real people. Like Nixon went on a bender.
But I would recommend everybody listening check out the Projection Booth podcast. There were 2 episodes, one on Battlefield Earth and one on, I think, is it Mission to Mu or something? Mm. There were 2 films related to Scientology, and they have a whole section on Jack Parsons where they interview somebody who wrote a book on him, and it's like a half hour because they're long podcasts. There's like a whole section just on that. So look up those. They're from like 2012, 2013, and I listened to that probably about a year before I read this book, so I kind of had a little bit of a preparation for the whole Jack Parsons thing, and he, if anything, there was more weird stuff than they put in the book around him.
Well, before we
I wanted to ask people what they thought about the fact that the Lodge creatures, other than a fleeting mention of the giant maybe, just aren't in this at all. And if you thought that was kind of casting, or because Frost doesn't see the mythology the same way, or what you guys thought.
All right, so while they're writing that in the chat, I just want to take a break real quick and ask Joel and Debbie what you guys thought of that 2-minute Showtime teaser that got dropped this week. Debbie, we'll start with you.
Oh, I was really excited to see it. It's the best thing I've seen in ages. I think just this cast, and especially Kyle, just sounds so excited by it. Like genuinely excited, like it seems to be coming from the heart rather than from a script.
Well, yeah. Well, Fire Walk with Me was a long time ago, and so he regrets how he was acting back then.
What's strange is Kyle doesn't almost look like he's aged that much since Fire Walk with Me. I mean, he sort of seemed to look like he was living the party life with Helena Christensen or something, but he was only early 30s then. And, you know, in Fire Walk with Me, he kind of looked a little bit puffy, maybe a bit kind of worn out compared to the Cooper we saw in the show. But now he looks almost exactly the same. Obviously, you know, he might have a bit of a dye in his hair or something, but it's obviously the power of Gorman Bozier or something, and Bob, I think. So,
Joel,
I think that
Joel, what did you think?
Yeah, I'll show
of the book or the teaser? I mean,
I thought it was fun. I mean, this is kind of a trivial observation, but I thought it was fun to see how everyone looked 25 years later. A lot of them I've seen, Tom McLaughlin, Lynch, and Alex. But Harry Goaz, that was a surprise, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah, I thought
the fact that he looked older, but that he was talking as somebody other than Andy.
Right.
It's very surreal, because I don't think I've ever seen him out of character.
I also thought it had a good balance between the older cast members and the newer cast members. So.
Yeah, Amy Shields came across well in her short bit, and I looked for all the footage of her speaking, like doing an interview and on YouTube, and then all it did was just give me loads of Amy Shields. You know, it gave me like loads of links to interviews with the cast of Final Fantasy, and then I only found one little interview with her where she's been interviewed by this whole bunch of complete douche-waffles, and she's Irish, but she came across as like a real strong female, like almost, Jodie Foster. And I can just imagine her hunting down, evil Coop, doing people from him and stuff. Just that kind of thing is what I want to see, just rescuing them from pits whilst Coop shout, "Put the lotion on," and all that sort of thing. It's just...
All right, Joel and Debbie. Good.
I was going to say, do you think that she's going to play this Tamara Preston?
I don't know about
that. FBI agent.
Well, I think the people in the teaser are prominently featured in the show. I can't imagine them just throwing on someone who has one line into that teaser.
I hope he's in it a lot, because
I think he is, James. He's one of the first people announced. He's one of the first people announced. He's a big person on the book, the audio book, and now he's in the teaser. It's pretty apparent that he is. But I mean, do you guys?
They need people like that in it to keep people watching, I think.
Joel and Debbie, I have a question for you. Do you think that the large cast list that was dropped? Do you think, in typical Lynchian fashion, though, that this is also a ruse, and that there's a lot of cast members that aren't announced either? Or do you think that is it?
Well, can I just say that I think that the cast will probably be more in the region of about 470, because the book keeps paying attention to the year 47, and I think that's a clue. There's probably double the cast since he released, the 217 thing, minus the 0. So it's probably now been doubled in a joke, Twin Peaks. And he's like, "I'm bringing in all these extra cash. Give me the money, Showtime, or I'm leaving again." They're like, "Okay, Lynch, we don't want you leaving again, but you've got to pay a minimum wage." And that's what Sherilyn Fenn is always complaining about, because she had to work for minimum wage. So now they've probably brought in loads of people like Sylvester Stallone, Chuck Norris. I mean, Chuck Norris did say he, was a fan of Lynch and stuff. So it's going to be like an ass-kicking spectacular.
They're going to have to get...
Go ahead, Debbie.
Sorry. I was going to say, they're going to have to get somebody pretty good in to play Toad now that he's one of the Bookhouse boys.
Yeah.
Well, the actor who played Toad is still alive, I believe.
Did you not pick that up in the book?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he may have always been a Bookhouse boy, maybe.
James, you got to let Joel respond.
Oh, no, I was just saying
Sorry.
his favorite book is an R. Crumb comic.
Yeah.
I thought that was fun.
Well, I like Robert Crumb as well, because I like that kind of woman with a, pear-shaped bottom. So I'm there with Toad on that one. I like eating lots of food, ogling women, really. So, you know, Toad was one of my favorite characters, really. I hope we see a lot of him in the new show, really. Preferably in the Black Lodge, just Toad, you know, stumbling into it.
So one thing that James and I have been talking about in recent podcasts is that this whole 1984 thing that's happening in this book, and the fact that Laura's diary began in 1984. I mean, what do you think? Do you think something happened in 1984 to throw off this potential timeline? Or do you think the dossier was fiddled with, you know, sometime in the 25 years in between, you know, the show and the new season?
The only thing
I think the whole...
Go ahead, Debbie.
Sorry. It's totally random and just part of this silly mythology of the book, but the only thing I sort of thought is, well, what if Flora is this moon child that they keep talking about? I don't know. Bit random.
She may be, yeah. She may be. I think the whole thing could end with that a bit like the scene in Buffalo 66 where the song Moonchild comes in. Is it King Crimson? It's like, Moonchild, la 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 la, and Animal Life.
Oh,
that's the end.
Did you notice that the date February 24 came up quite a few times as well?
Yeah, I saw that.
What do you think? What do you think, Joel? You're someone who likes to get into the details of it. What do you think this whole 1984 business is about?
I didn't even
Annie Lennox.
To be honest, you scooped me there. I don't know what were the things that happened in 1984.
Go ahead, James.
It's obviously it is related to the Eurythmics and their soundtrack to the film 1984, which Laura was a big fan of. I heard, and when she bought it on vinyl. When she put that on the record player that Leyland had bought her, that into Bob, you know, by going around, it was like, Honey Lennox, damn you!
Joel, we have
the fury of my own momentum.
Joel, we have a question for you in the chat. Someone wants to know, who do you think is the hooded figure that was mentioned also in the book In the Woods?
Dave Stewart.
The figure that took Major Briggs?
Maybe, unless it's yeah, I mean maybe because they said it's also mentioned in the book.
It's a dweller on the threshold, but there's.
I don't know. I was more wondering. I mean, not to change the subject, but because I don't have an answer to that, but I was kind of wondering what the little gray alien was, but had any relation to the man from another place, the one that Nixon and Jackie Gleason. Oh yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Jackie Gleason is now part of the Twin Peaks mythos. That cracked me up. So
that was because that fits in with the whole. The Gray was there.
The guy who married Robin Wadley.
He was there, and he witnessed some of Jackie. He witnessed some of Jackie Gleason's humor, and then he transformed later on in evolution into Michael J. Anderson. And his sense of humor was so developed that he was like, "I'll just throw out a few jokes about Lynch raping his own daughter, you know, just for, you know, giggles."
Was he anti-Semitic, the little alien?
Yeah, he's an anti-Semitic dwarf who people want to kick across a football field. So that's what some of Cameron's viewers said they wanted to do to Michael Anderson. They wanted to kick him.
Well,
I mean, people don't say that about Daniel Day-Lewis, do they? It's like
they don't. But Daniel Day-Lewis also doesn't post, you know, Trump Pence.
No, he didn't.
Anyways,
when he was making Lincoln, he didn't just tweet a joking like, "Oh, by the way, LOL, Spielberg raped his own daughter," you know, just for kind of, you know, just to promote the film in a kind of weird way.
So what you're saying is you don't buy the conspiracy rumors that Michael J. Anderson actually is in the new show, and he did that just for publicity.
Yeah, that's definitely not happening.
Yeah.
I definitely think he is in the show, but
to get back to the thing though, I'm kind of curious where all of that stuff, all that really like Frostian stuff, is going to relate, plug back into the stuff from the show. Because other than the rain, really, there's like almost none of that in the book, which is exactly like what happened to the show after Leland died, and you hardly ever saw Bob, hardly ever saw Little Man in the Red Room, the One-Armed Man, all that stuff. It was like, no, we're putting that aside. We're going to talk about Project Blue Book. We're going to talk about, these lodges out in the wood. And then Lynch kind of brought it back in. It was like, okay, well, we're going to tie it all in together. But now in this book, Frost is sort of going off on the limb again. It's like he doesn't really seem to like writing those Lynch characters. Like, I don't know if maybe he feels like, well, that's his stuff. He does that, and he's better at that particular type of thing or something. But I'm wondering if people think that all these little tangents are actually going to plug back into the Red Room mythology.
Well, speaking of that, people are curious to know whether or not the Black Lodge.
Somebody just joined us.
Yes, Eric, thank you. People are wondering whether, if we get any Red Room scenes in this new series, if that's going to be something that's interesting and entertaining, or is that just going to be like a checklist for the fans? Like, oh, okay, here's a Red Room scene, and we're going to be judging it based on previous Red Room scenes. And it's going to be interesting. That's a lot for Lynch and Frost to live up to. But before we get going any further in that direction, Eric, can you hear me? I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now. So obviously we're discussing the book. So why don't you? And I read your review, which is on your blog. But why don't you tell the viewers what your overall impressions of the book without getting into details right away? Sure.
Well, just at the high level, I really enjoyed it. It's new Twin Peaks content that after 11 years for me and 25 years for some people to have anything new about Twin Peaks, I thought was pretty exciting. But as I started reading the book, I was listening to this a little bit before I hopped on, so I know you guys have been talking about it. But I started noticing the kind of the discrepancies in the timeline changes in people's stories, and the example I always point to, and again, I won't get into super close detail, but like the Ed and Nadine and the Norma stuff, which was something that Frost himself had a hand in crafting when it was on the show. So I just started noticing all these things, and reading fan sites too. Like, there's even more in terms of like historical dates and whatnot. And I think my view, and maybe it's just desperate of me, that I don't want to believe that, Frost is just either throwing this stuff out or was so careless, but it seems to me like these changes are deliberate, that our attention is being called to them. And I use the Ed and Norma thing as an example because it seems like that's a really obvious one if you're a Twin Peaks fan and you have watched the show a number of times over the years. Like, that scene is just so memorable. With Albert laughing or trying to keep from laughing, and just this interesting backstory on how Nadine lost her eye, that it seems like changing that story is such an obvious tell. And that episode was entirely written by Mark Frost. Exactly. That was the second season premiere. That was not like just some piddly episode in the back half of season 2. That was a significant episode that a lot of people saw.
And a really good one, actually. A
fantastic episode, absolutely. Like, again, it's not just some throwaway episode. And again, teleplay Mark Frost and David Lynch. So it's like Mark Frost said, "Okay, you've got half an hour to come in and make any changes if you want, Lynch. I'll give you that." Right.
And he's like, "Right, okay, I just want an extra scene of him saying, 'Damn, that pie is good.'" And he's like, "All right, Lynch, go back to your remedial class now." It's okay. Do some meditation or something.
But anyway, like, just genuinely, I think that there are just some really obvious things, and I think the fact that they are so obvious is a clue of some sort. I don't know, I'm not one of these internet sleuths, so I'm definitely not going to be the one to crack this thing wide open. But
you don't have to be an internet sleuth, though, Eric. You don't have to be an internet sleuth, though, to sort of pick up on the photo of Audrey. It's got like aged 18. And then it's got, it talks about Laura being 18 when Dr. Jacoby was seeing her. Right. And we're told in the pilot that this girl was 17 years old. So, I mean,
yeah, that was a big.
I can't remember whether we ever saw that we knew that Audrey was 18 or not. But
James, I don't mean, yeah, those things are like, again, those are details too. I just didn't mention them, but like, I noticed that. Yeah, again, and the Laura.
But it seems so obvious that it's obviously not true. It seemed obvious to me that Audrey was supposed to be the same age as Laura, and
or obviously manipulated. Like, again, I don't. Cameron asked for my high level views, and so I don't want to go too deep.
Well, I mean, cover it, but what do you think is the point of a book that is false?
Well, what's weird is like I actually don't think all of it is false. It seems to me like if you really look at it, there are specific one detail that's prominent enough to mention, like the moon landing date, like that was wrong. Like, to me, that's a sign of something. Like, that's such an obvious date. Like, school kids can recite that date. The fact that it would be wrong should be, like, an indication. But then when you get, like, for instance, I actually think the stuff that's real is, like, the stuff with the log lady. Like, the article on the log lady, I think, is real. I think the news article about Audrey and Pete, like, that stuff seems real.
Well,
I even think the stuff about...
But even, can I just say one thing about this? Is like a real. It's like Mark Frost has indeed. I'll say another thing that a few of our jokes about the series and things like this. Because I mean, there are two references. There's a selection of books which the Bookhouse Boys are supposed to be looking at. James Hurley's favourite book right there is Charlotte's Web. There's also references earlier in the book to. I had to try to get him to read books and stuff, but James refused and things. I mean, and it's all the things any fan who doesn't like James Hurley needs as ammunition, i.e. they're basically saying that his favourite book was Charlotte's Web. What? Is that the year when it was coming out, when the show came out?
He is too busy brooding, looking out in the distance, and riding his hog, James. You think he's got time for books?
But none of them make sense. It's like
James'
favourite book.
James, hang on. Joel's trying to say something. Go ahead.
I want to jump in on one point because you mentioned the Log Lady article. That's the only thing in the book that drove me nuts because there are so many contradictions in Robert Jacoby's timeline. Like, it literally makes no sense. If you look at all the information they give you, sometimes within a couple paragraphs of each other, you find out. So supposedly in 1947, he's the 16-year-old reporter who's in the 3rd grade with Margaret Lanterman, and is also at college away from Twin Peaks. And
there are some. To be honest, I'm completely confused
but also
about it.
in 1986, like, just like what? Like all the other characters, yeah, there were little discrepancies here and there, but that guy was like a hodgepodge of conflicting information that was like right next to each other.
And then also another inconsistency is that the reasons why Audrey went to the bank to chain herself up. I mean, it's completely the opposite of the reason why she went there.
That's true.
But even stuff like that, like I feel like it's loose enough that you can kind of finagle it. You can be like, well, she just didn't tell her dad, but she discovered something. Like, it's a stretch.
Well, she said that.
But,
if you remember, she said that in the note. She's like, I won't tell you how I found out about your secret plans. And I think, like, fans of the show were thinking the whole time, too, that this is all a ruse, that Ben Horne is just pretending to be altruistic just to block Catherine's plans until he can figure out what to do next, kind of a thing. Yeah. So that, I didn't think that was especially egregious.
Well, see, I don't. I think that when he came out of that whole Confederacy thing, I think that he did turn around, and then when he got hit in the head at the end, that's going to revert him back to his old ways.
But it's open to interpretation. What just baffled me about this character was literally on the same page they have been saying, I was in the 3rd grade with Margaret, and then a few paragraphs later he's like, I graduated from high school in World War II, and meanwhile she's getting inducted after World War II as a 9-year-old. I just couldn't figure out what they were doing with that. So I've heard people speculate, maybe this character doesn't really exist, Jacoby's brother or something, but I don't know. I think maybe he wanted to do a tribute to Catherine Coulson because she died, like, maybe near the end of him writing this book. So he was like, I'll have Robert Jacoby writing it, forgetting that, he had made all this completely contradictory info earlier in the book, and then an editor didn't catch it. I'm just
That's pretty much...
rationalize.
That's pretty much my only reason for believing it.
People in the chat board says they feel Sherilyn Fenn will make a 3-second cameo in a wooden furniture knob after her latest attitude. Some people are saying the dossier is probably from outer space. They want to know.
Yeah.
They want to know what besides the book, do you think the new series will get into Josie Packard at all?
See, I don't think so. Like that, I really feel like. So I heard you, Cameron, earlier, kind of lamenting Hank's fate, and that they revealed this in a book. And I kind of feel like the new show, there are probably some characters out there. Oddly enough, Hank's actually one character I thought would have been like picture perfect to include in the new show, because you could always made the case that after he went back to jail, he was just in for 25 years and he got, now he's out.
Well, listen, Eric, it's not so much the fact they killed him off screen in a book, maybe. It's the fact that he's on the audio book. So obviously they're still in contact with Chris Mulkey. You know what I mean? So it's just, and he's going to the festivals and representing the show. So that seems to be just like an odd cast member to kill off in a book when he's still so active in the community. That's all.
I think it's just, again, I think it was just a logistical thing in terms of story. Because like Josie too, I feel like you got all the information about Josie in terms of her background and those secrets that you're going to get. Hopefully we might learn a little more about how she is, maybe sort of in like the wood of Great Northern or whatever that is. But like, as far as like her secret past, I think that's why I believe that, is because I don't think Josie's going to figure in heavily in the new show. So I think this was a good opportunity to be like, here's Josie, here's everything about her. And then similarly with Hank, I think it was just logistical. It's like, here's a way of getting rid of this character that, if you really add it up, was not that significant of a character, and we address his fate. I mean, hell, even Lana got a bit of.
I will get into that later, Eric. I will get into that later. I have a prepared statement.
Okay.
I like that. And I was wondering, I'm like, they better try and at least suggest that she killed Dougie.
Well, what is all this? What is all this crap about Mark Frost saying in New York that Lana won Miss Twin Peaks? I mean, literally, are they trying to erase Annie Blackburn from the timeline?
I think he just misspoke. I mean, that's all I think it is.
No, it's a joke.
This will be my grand statement on whether Frost is planting all these sneaky little. I think these guys just haven't thought about it that much in 25 years, the way the rest of us have, and they don't remember a bunch of stuff. They aren't attached to the stuff that's there necessarily. So I think most of the thing, I don't think he's being tricky. I think he's just either, I can change this, nobody will care, or like not remembering, we did this or that. Although there was a lot of stuff that was surprisingly consistent, especially the dates. I was surprised that they stuck that closely to the February, March 1989. Like there were a few things that were off, but that was pretty accurate. But I really do think they don't have as much of a grand plan for that type of stuff as we think they do. That's my suspicion. But as for Annie, it is weird. I didn't notice that she wasn't in the books. I don't know why, because I was waiting to see if she was. Like, how are they going to mention her? But you're right. It's like she never came up, and Heather Graham's not in the show. And that, to me, is the weirdest thing about this new season, because... Yeah.
And yet Cooper's on Twitter.
The line of the show, the line that we've been stuck with for 25 years is, how's Annie? That was the clip.
And Cooper has gone on, or Kyle MacLachlan has gone on Twitter to say that we will find out how's Annie in the show. Somebody actually wrote in a few days ago saying they feel hopefully this is a joke, they feel that the show will begin with Cooper brushing his teeth with Annie's finger and hair as his toothbrush.
I just, again, the mistakes are too obvious. The omissions are so obvious, and Annie is probably the biggest one. I mean, other than I think the Black Lodge. Actually, someone in here mentioned the Black Lodge, the White Lodge, and the Black Lodge were mentioned somewhere in the book. Where was that? I must have missed that.
It was in the section where they're talking about Aleister Crowley, because obviously he'd written a book about the Black and the White Lodge called The Moonchild.
Ah, okay. I'll take a look at that.
It's around Jack Parsons' part, so all the kind of esoteric.
Well, Joel, I mean, we've had discussions, all of us have had discussions about Fire Walk With Me and how, there are so many flips and doubles and changes in that movie that it can't just be a careless set decorator. It had to have been on purpose. So, like, if there was one or two discrepancies in this book, I would say, all right, maybe it was an error. The fact that there's so many, it has to be done on purpose. My question is, for what reason do we have to purchase a book that is just completely full of discrepancies? What is the purpose of it for us?
I don't think, I do, yeah, some of it is conscious, I think. Obviously, the Ed and the Day Bean is the best example, because that was, I mean, the hunting part's the same, but I don't know, maybe he felt he could just get away with the rest of it. Like, oh, nobody's going to remember that, as a Norma wasn't married to Hank yet when he married Nadine and all that. I don't know. But I think the Lana winning Miss Twin Peaks thing, that sounds like he just totally forgot or something.
Right.
But that was the whole reason why Wyndham Earl kidnapped her, whoever won.
Well, see,
How
another
did
thing.
Mark Frost forget that? Of course he didn't forget.
What did he say? What was his exact statement?
James?
Exact statement. All that somebody said that he said it to a fan or something, and I think basically all that Frost is doing is like messing around with the fans. The intention of the book is to even mess around with the fans in a natured way. I mean, the idea of why do I need to buy this book? I mean, you could say that about any book, It's like Twin Peaks is not, whatever book anyone wrote about Twin Peaks related to the story in it, I'd be disappointed because David Lynch. I mean, if you imagine this book directed by David Lynch, people would probably be kind of pretty keen on it in some ways, but put it into a book version and people are like, well, how does this relate? What is it going to lead to? And another thing Frost said is that the book acts as a prologue to the new show. So,
we actually just touched on, you mentioned Wyndham Earl, Cameron.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually looking forward to reading about some of Wyndham Earl's backstory, and especially when they started getting into the Project Blue Book stuff, I kept waiting for there to be like some reveal of Earl there messing around doing crazy stuff. And then the fact that he only appeared in the book in the list of agents on the side, and then briefly Agent TP kind of tells you some history. Which
we've already spoiled that. Go ahead, you can say her name.
What is it, Tamara Preston or something?
Yeah.
Tamara Preston.
Go ahead.
Well, sorry, TP is just easier to say. But she also got wrong what happened, and is that just me misremembering? Because I thought Wyndham Earl stabbed Coop. She says he shot him. Like, that's another difference. But again, the fact that Earl is only mentioned in such small amounts.
And remember, in that detail in the show, it's the way Ray Wise plays it. He very powerfully states that Bob was there at the time that Earl attacked Cooper because he knew about Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I don't know that I ever interpreted it that way. Personally, I always just felt like because he's like some otherworldly entity, similar to like the demon from Exorcist, how it seems to know all kinds of like that's how I took it. But maybe there's a literalist. Maybe Bob was there because again, Wyndham Earl was pursuing the Black Lodge all along. So perhaps, yeah.
So he could have just been monitoring him, that type of thing. Yeah. I don't know, but
another thing that we didn't mention yet about the chronological discrepancy. According to the book, Teresa Banks died, Cooper did that whole investigation, and then sometime in the year before Twin Peaks, that's when all the stuff with Caroline and Wyndham Earl happened, which is way different from what was ever suggested in the book or on the show.
Well, see, that actually I was trying to figure out, like, did they ever give a time frame for that? Like, I don't remember them ever saying, like, oh, that was a few years ago in Pittsburgh. Like, I think they just always referred to it in the past. And I could be I'm sure someone here or in the chat maybe knows better than me.
It was like a year or two before, and it even goes into Cooper's diary, my life, my tapes.
Okay.
Well, in the My Life, My Tapes, it was 10 years before.
Oh wow.
And then I think on the show, maybe they don't ever exactly say. It just seems weird for me to think that Cooper's thing with Wyndham is after the Fire Walk with Me stuff. It just feels weird to me, but maybe that's...
Somebody in the chat says Miss Twin Peaks was actually Mrs. Treeman. That's who won. And yeah, so...
No Tremont either.
Yeah, that's interesting. There was no Chalfont, no Treeman.
Right.
After the ring, that's it.
Everybody in the chat seems pretty secure in the fact that this book, one of the purposes of the book is just to not erase Annie Blackburn from ever happening in Twin Peaks, but just trying to erase her from just the timeline to protect her for some reason.
And the same thing with Wyndham Earle as well. That he's been erased from the book and everything because,
right,
like, he's in hiding in somewhere. I don't see him as being dead, and I never bought that idea of him just because Bob took his soul. That doesn't mean that he's dead. That just means,
And also, I've had someone.
Well, I don't know what it means, but it doesn't mean he's dead.
I've had someone contact me recently that suggested to me that they never felt like Annie Blackburn actually got out of the lodge herself. That the fact that she's acting all catatonic, kind of like Coop is in his room at the end of the show, when you see her in the missing pieces in the hospital, they suggested that maybe her doppelganger got out too, and they're all trapped in the lodge.
Yeah, probably. Like Wyndham Earle could have got out as well, and he was acting in that same sort of way since he had, fire shooting out of his head. Maybe he was just kind of a mumbling, idiot come out, wandering through the woods somewhere, and then the rest is really, and maybe Kenneth Welsh will pop up in some small capacity or whatever in the new show, and it's being kept as a secret.
Yeah.
The aspect of Tamara Preston being, some fans were like, that's ridiculous, having a special agent or whatever she's, well, we know she's a special agent. She's looking into this whole case and trying to read the whole archive and make sense of it. And her notes are fairly brief, really. I mean, it's not like she spent eons looking at it all, is it? And so it begs the question, like, is she even real? And is that her real name? I mean, what are the chances of a special agent being assigned to Twin Peaks with the initials TP? People are saying that the way being looked at by her and things, it's as if, is she even trustworthy for us? And that's what the book is about, on a big question of reliability, and the narrator reliable, basically,
I didn't think she was assigned to Twin Peaks. I just assumed she was assigned to the investigation of this dossier. Because did they even specify that it was found in Twin Peaks?
The dossier is about Twin Peaks.
Can I just say...
it's funny, like, tangentially almost, though.
Can I just say how...
Oh, come on, Eric.
I really did not like her little notes in the sidelines and this kind of, like, pseudo-mystery of who the archivist was going to be. Like, it would just be like, oh, we're getting closer to finding out who this archivist is. I mean, I was really hoping it was going to be...
It's very faux naive, isn't it? It's deliberately done to make you as the reader look at it and go, what? This is not... this is dubious. The whole thing about the whole book is, it is like a secret history. But the thing is that the secrets aren't being given to us. We have to make our own mind up about all these secrets. To us in the new show, even, because it's just not Lynch, especially, or Frost style, to say this is what the Blue Rose means. Josie died, and lost all that weight or whatever. It's kind of, they're just perennial mysteries for us. And
Eric, Joel, this will get your minds racing. Somebody in the chat, Philippe, writes, he believes Tamara Preston is an anagram.
Oh.
So
it could be.
Everyone at home play around with the letters and see what you come up with.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I just took her story at face value. Because, I mean, like, there's, like, formal FBI documentation about her specifically. I don't know why maybe I shouldn't, given that there's changes to everything else, maybe I shouldn't, but I sort of took that part as straightforward. And the fact that she's just some stranger, too, like, she wouldn't know the differences between, like, how Ed and Norma knew each other or whatever.
But it's like the thing that it all comes down to for me is almost like I wonder if there's somebody, like the film A Beautiful Mind or something. And I don't know, I can't remember what the name of that guy is in it. But
I thought of that exact comparison.
could somebody make sense of this book if they were a mathematical sort of genius? And they looked, they got the cover as well. And then you take it out, it's got all of these angles all over it, like in a jigsaw or whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying that everything has to mean something, but it's on the cover as well. So, it's like we're being told basically that all these bits in the book are all different pieces that fit into and makes like mystery in the woods, bigger mystery in Twin Peaks, etc. And that's the kind of thing I like in it. I'm not really that fascinated with reading stories about UFOs and things like that, even though I really love the film Close Encounters. But it's, for me, it bodes well for the new show, because I don't think it will be necessary for many people to have sort of like, say if I wanted my mum to watch it or something, or my dad, I don't think they need to go back and watch the first and second season in little detail. But as long as they know about the central mystery of Laura Palmer, they could kind of get to grips with the new show, and the way the mysteries are being. I'm really curious as to how they'll deal with things like the Blue Road. Will it just be brought up again as a?
And do you think this entire new series is going to revolve around Laura Palmer? The entire thing, or do you think it's just going to be like a core essential element to it?
I think obviously that they are going to continue that because of the way they are featuring Cheryl Lee in it, and then we see a teaser of.
Do you remember when? Remember when Fire Walk with Me came out, and every critic came down on Lynch just because, again, with the Laura Palmer thing, you're going to bring that up, and now people are excited that he's returning to Twin Peaks with Laura Palmer again. It's amazing how time can heal all wounds. But yeah, I'm just curious to know.
I don't think it will be about. It's not going to be about the same thing, though, is it? Now, it's not going to be about obviously, learning the sordid and sad truth of her life. It's much bigger in terms of we know that there's going to be more. There's going to be another crime, another murder occurs in Twin Peaks, for instance. This guy, I think, will relate back to
Adamo and
to previous things,
Adamo in the chat writes, Mark Frost was very much aware that he wasn't permitted to disclose any critical material of the upcoming show because David Lynch threatened to cut his balls off.
He's joking, but I very much felt like some of the omissions in the book were almost like, Frost and Lynch sat down and was like, hey, I'm going to write this book. And he's like, great, more power to you. And he's like, but listen, I would prefer if you don't talk about Annie, if you don't talk about this, if you don't talk about that. And I could see Frost even saying, it's like, well, I got to make reference to like the Black Lodge and stuff, like, and he's like, well, it's like, okay, but you can't, you have to talk about it in a certain way. Like I could, just think of how Lynch has been so,
he does have veto
scarce.
power. He has veto power because every time Frost wanted to do the graphic novel or other aspects of a new thing of Twin Peaks, Lynch would always say no.
Right. So I just, some of that stuff, I think there's an in the book reason. And, honestly, maybe that's what inspired Frost to do this whole kind of mystery within a mystery thing. Is it's like Lynch was telling him, like, well, you can't talk about some things. And Frost was like, well, that's why else are people buying the book?
But does it have to be 350-something pages?
I enjoyed it. The discrepancies aside, I was ravenously working my way through this book, and it was an interesting read for me. And again, I also listened to the audio book too, which, great, I think, voice acting and good
Which
stuff.
Which was better?
Cameron, if you were in a classroom now and you were just scoffing at Eric saying you haven't honestly enjoyed it, you would be asked to leave.
I don't know that I liked one. I think I'd say I like the book better, mostly because it comes with pictures. The thing you miss out in the audiobook is like, because I actually got the audiobook first, because I was one of the poor souls who Amazon, for some reason, I ordered the damn thing like 7 months ago, but I got it like 2 days after everybody else. But you hear the special agent describing the box, for example, that the dossier comes in, and that sounds very interesting, very fascinating. But when you have the book and you're reading it, it's like you see it, and you see it's got like the Black Lodge Owl Cave symbols on it, and that's just like, that's awesome. So I think I like the book better, but the guy they had to do the archivist voice, and again, we've already spoiled a bunch of stuff. The guy who did Major Briggs' voice, I thought was perfect, because he actually sounded a good bit like, oh gosh, and his name escapes me, but the actor who played him originally. So
and let's
John Donis Davis.
And let's be honest, for serious Twin Peaks fans, who of course are going to be the ones who buy this book, was it really a surprise at the end who it turned out to be? There's only a few people it could have been.
Yeah, I was already starting to question when I was reading some of like the archivist, like the way the archivist wrote, like sounded very familiar. And then once it started getting into like the deep kind of military stuff that was like classified, I was kind of pretty much convinced by that point.
Wayne in the chat wants to know if volume 2 of this book will talk about.
Debbie was going to say something.
I know that, James. Let me just finish what I was saying, and then I'll get to her. That they're saying that they think volume 2 of the book is going to concentrate on whatever happened to little Nicky. All right, go ahead, Debbie.
I was just going to say, do you remember when the first few pages came out on the internet, and one of the first things I said is, this is definitely somebody that knows name? Are we keeping that a secret?
Go ahead.
This is definitely somebody that knows Major Briggs, because I got that feeling straight away from that first quote. So it was kind of obvious to me.
In fact, I think, in a way, given who the archivist is, there's a part of me that wishes this book was more about, the files of Major Briggs's Project Blue Book. If this was like, all the stuff about the Dugpuds and all that stuff that Earl was investigating, I wish that had gone into that. Given the fact who the archivist is and what a great amount of the material in this book is covering, it would just make more sense to have it be the Project Blue Book files.
Did you guys already talk about how the way the book was originally like pitched and billed is nothing at all of what it actually is? Do you guys ever talk about that?
Several times on other podcasts. But yeah, go ahead if one of you guys want to talk about it.
Oh, well, I went back because I remembered thinking, like, again, hey, I really enjoyed the book, but I remember thinking, like, when you ultimately finish the book, it covers like 0% of like what happened in the last 25 years, except for some nuggets about things that happened kind of like post end of the show, but really only within like a few days, whatever of the end of the show. And so I went back and I found like the press release from the publisher, and it very like the press release is not ambiguous at all. It's like, this will cover the past like what happened in the lives of the people of Twin Peaks in the past 25 years, and it does not do that at all.
Right. And that's why I think it changed. I think this book completely changed from the secret lives of Twin Peaks to the secret history of Twin Peaks.
Right.
And that's kind of a bummer, because that's what I was wanting.
So
but
I think you should give your review now, Cameron.
Oh, you want me to? You don't want to? You don't want me to wait?
We built up to that point.
Okay, so just bear with me, guys. I wrote a statement.
Okay.
Yeah. So just bear with me. All right. So keep in mind, everybody, that the new series and stuff like that, because Mark Frost says, all will be revealed in time. This is just how I feel now. Okay. So, all right. So on Friday night, after I opened the book on camera with all of you, I did kind of an unboxing video. I sat down on the couch and began to read, with an open mind, the novel that we've all been discussing in various forms for a while now, The Secret History of Twin Peaks by Mark Frost. And now that I've read it, I can tell you my honest feelings about it after reading it cover to cover. No longer do I have to worry or speculate, because I now know what this book is with certainty. The first thing I will say is that the book is well written. It's clear Mark Frost understands that every sentence needs a subject and a predicate. If you have to read 15 to 20 pages to read anything, even remotely theoretical, about the subject, why any of us bought this book in the first place, then the author at hand just trolled all of us. If anyone else had written the same book, very few of you out there would be praising this. But because Mark Frost wrote it, I see a collective amount of people wetting themselves all over the internet repeating, "We're not worthy, we're not worthy." This video podcast has done something over the years that others just simply don't. And that's it. And we have been 100% supportive of Mark Frost as being the co-creator of Twin Peaks. He directed an absolutely amazing episode in the season 1 finale and is an incredible writer and showrunner when he's motivated to do so. What I see in this book is not the writer, director, and co-creator of Twin Peaks, but a man who wanted to publish his historical notes of a book that wasn't going anywhere and then shoved the brand of Twin Peaks into it in order to make it appealing to his publishing house. Mark Frost has said he wanted to have fun with the idea of the kind of mistakes and faulty memory encouraged by this kind of dossier format. But what that really means is that all of us just pay $20 or more to read Frost's recreation of Forrest Gump, only using the Milford brothers and Andrew Packard as his protagonists to weave us through this convoluted, quote-unquote, false history. And frankly, closing out the book, reminding us of Lana, the worst character in the history of the show, in not one, but 2 pictures, is pretty darn unforgivable in my eyes. This is the work of a man who wrote 2 horrible Fantastic Four movies, and not the one that so brilliantly gave us what could be the greatest television show in the history of the medium. However, the book's greatest sin is that it's boring. Something I never thought possible about something I hold so near and dear to my heart. And I'm certain the people out there who really like it only do so because it says Twin Peaks and it's the first piece of canon, not counting the missing pieces, we've had in 25 years. But that's just not good enough for me. Before the book came out, I would joke that if Mark Frost killed Annie Blackburn off screen in this thing, I would take the novel down to the local park and burn it in one of the barbecue pits, on camera, of course. But this work of fiction is not worth the matches and lighter fluid. It's barely worth the return slip I'm going to use to get my money back. This book was a waste of Mark Frost's time in writing it, and certainly a waste of my time in reading it. I'm profoundly disappointed, and remember, I'm a Twin Peaks apologist. Now, does this make me worry about the upcoming series? Not at all. You see, I don't think this novel will have very little to do with the new series, except maybe to touch base on the possible theme of alternate timelines, which at this point to me sounds gag-inducing. But with Lynch and Frost at the helm, I'm pretty positive season 3 is going to be astounding, and in the words of Jennifer Lynch, mind-blowing. I mean, everything I've seen so far from Showtime and Lynch Frost Productions has been remarkable. So no matter what, we're all going to be in for an incredible treat next year.
So you liked it, huh?
Oh, yeah. Best book of the year.
That was really confusing.
That
I'm not convinced, to be honest, Cameron. Your statement is less convincing than The Secret History of Twin Peaks.
I would never begrudge you your opinion. I definitely wouldn't. I never thought. I thought from the beginning that this is because even if the book was like the lives of people over 25 years, like I never thought we were going to get a chapter on like Agent Cooper. It was going to like talk about Pete. It was going to talk about Catherine and Ben. And yeah, it might have talked about like Audrey and some of those guys. And we'd get like hints here and there of the things we really wanted to know. But I always thought that what I was going to get was going to be something like this. And so again, I'm not trying to be like an apologist for it, but I think I got what I expected to. There wasn't as much like new, quote unquote, new material as I would have liked, meaning like post-show or kind of like new revelations about stuff.
But weren't there parts of the book where you're reading for a few pages going, what is the point of all this? I mean, why are we even here? We're not even talking about the subject at hand.
Yeah, but surely you felt that way through the whole book, Cameron, from what you've said. I mean, if you even read the whole thing.
Oh, I did read the whole thing, and like I said, the little stuff in there that had to do with the show, I was just.
It doesn't make sense though. If you didn't like it for 20 pages or something, why would you continue reading it?
Okay, so if you don't like the first 2 episodes of the new series, you're gonna stop watching it?
A book is completely different to a visual medium.
No, it's not.
Said before already. It is completely different. This book, if you expect it to be like the show in any way, That's
not what I was
stimulation
expecting.
it offers.
I didn't want that.
Seems that
I
basically
wanted something entertaining.
You wanted to be stimulating.
No, this is a college. This is a college textbook. This is not a novel of like enjoyment. It's something you have to study.
What's wrong with that? That's what I wanted.
Yeah,
that's really
what I was expecting.
That's really funny, James, because yesterday you were saying that you didn't like the book very much, and now you're saying you're on the positive side.
So basically, I have to side with you, or else.
I'm saying that whatever side I take, you go to the opposite. Just state your case.
No, before, and I have sort to you, yeah, like listening to you, what you're going to say. Wait for the actual recording to sort of just stand up for my own opinion on it,
Well, that's
and I'm not
fine.
pretending I've read every page either, because I've not, in the time I got it since Thursday, I've not really had the energy or the time to read every page.
When people say to me, "Oh, don't talk," are you going to talk about spoilers in this thing? I'm saying, what spoilers? I don't think there's anything in this book that is spoilers. There's
not really.
There's very little about Twin Peaks in this book. This is a history lesson that is has very little to do with what the subject matter is.
UFOs and stuff like that, they don't cover that generally in, if you go to study history, do they? Modern history.
Oh, people in the chat say the reason why James is great is because he's always a contrarian to what people say.
Well, no, I'm offering my genuine thoughts on it. In that,
I know, because yesterday we spoke and you said there were parts about you liked and there were parts about you didn't like it. So just
I said I was middling over it, but that doesn't mean that I'm.
See, you're just mad, and there's other people mad out there that I'm just not pro everything Twin Peaks, and
No, I don't. I just don't believe what you're saying, because you're claiming you've read every page and things like that.
Some people can read
the whole thing. I mean, I just don't know how you could have read it properly and so-called, as you say, studied it in that time. You must have been just like flipping over pages fast. And
Joel, did you finish reading the book? Go ahead, Debbie.
Can I just interject and say that, like, I have spent a whole day reading this book, and I've done it from an academic perspective. And like I said, I didn't find it an enjoyable read, but I persisted in reading it, even though I found it hard to get into, because I wanted the information, because I'm a fan. I found myself taking notes. It was almost like when I used to.
Yeah, that was the same as me.
I used to study English, and I was taking notes as I was going along. But what I can say is, like, there are parts of it, although it doesn't all tie in. There's the odd bit, like, from the notes I've got, that does tie into the series. Like, I know a lot of it, like the UFO stuff, I couldn't really get my head around, but there's more of the older stuff to do with the giants and things like that. There is relevant stuff in there, especially since they found one of the giants buried with copper rods. And I don't know if any of that's like another random thing I picked up on, but obviously copper's a conductor. So I don't know, like, I was making all these notes, and it was only little random things, but there is some tie-ins. But I understand what Cameron's saying as well, because I did have to read it from an academic point of view. It wasn't like reading a novel, if that makes sense.
And again, if it was something that I was remotely, and again, this differs, with everybody's where they're coming from. But for me personally, I didn't find anything was interesting, and I felt that a lot of it was the stuff that was interesting, like Josie Packard. We already knew all that stuff pretty much. I wasn't really too surprised.
I mean, that's not exactly true. I mean, like, we found out, like, exactly who Josie was, good supposition about why she did what she did. And, we kind of know some of her character. We always knew Josie was like a pretender, but all we knew was like the whole Andrew Packard stuff. I mean, this really fleshed out who she is, which is exactly what a book can do that the series can't. And again, probably won't, even really touch on at all in the new season, particularly if Michael Onken's not in it. I mean, there's no other connection for her.
Some people in the chat, Log Sadie writes, I do like the way that historical events and weird conspiracy things have been connected to the Twin Peaks story now. It makes it to a much bigger and even more meaningful story. And then Semper Callis writes, some of the most rewarding artistic and academic endeavors require a bit of drudgery. It is a good book, long-winded and repetitive, but it has a lot of value. Hey, listen, I'm glad people are enjoying it. I'm not trying to take away from you. I'm just saying that to me, it felt like a forced book and Much Ado About Nothing. I mean, I would have rather Frost not written this thing than have it just be sitting there. It feels like Lostpedia and all this other stuff that, you know, so anyway, I wasn't a fan.
Let me ask you a couple of questions then. So first of all, do you like My Life, My Tapes?
It's okay. I mean, I preferred The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer. That seemed like it was more like a written book.
I never liked Laura's Diary personally much.
Well, no, I'm just saying that actually you could tell, like, you know, somebody was passionate in what they were writing, as opposed to My Life, My Tapes seemed more like a job assignment.
Did you read,
I don't agree with that.
7, and if so, did you like that?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you read the list of 7, and if so, did you like that?
I never read it.
Okay. Because here's what I was going to say. I think, I mean, I don't know if I really totally, whoops, there, wrong thing. I don't know if I totally, it's going to sound weird, because I enjoyed the book, I liked it, I'm glad I read it, definitely not sending it back. I don't think you're, like, wrong exactly. The only thing that I think that I would push back on, I do think this is very much a Mark Frost book, and I think it's very much kind of his sensibility, and I think it's his sensibility on much of the show as well. And I think, for me, where I'm at, I kind of value that ephemera. And there was sort of a point where I didn't, maybe, but the more I got into Twin Peaks, the more I kind of cherish all the different, like, corners of it. And so that's what I really like. Is I think people always, not you, but, like, just in general, when they're talking about Lynch Frost, you know, Lynch get carried away and he would do all these critics, but Frost would keep him grounded. And I think it's the total opposite. I think Frost was the one who always liked to go off on tangents and sort of, well, why don't we bring in Project Blue Book, and why don't we bring in Hong Kong intrigue, and why don't we bring in, you know, he was always, and Wyndham Earle, this character from outside, this whole history with Cooper, and there's Blue Lights and Lodges, and this and that, and da-da-da. And it seems like he's always the one who wanted to expand, and Lynch is sort of more about focusing, honing in on these core elements. So I think, to me, this book was very much that. And, yeah, I think it's fair to say, I think you could definitely say it's sort of ephemeral. It's not really, like I said, I think 90% of it won't relate to the show. I do think some of it will. I do think it's kind of teeing up to the new show in a way, setting up some of the things that we are going to see and sort of giving us a little tip-off. But, I mean, I can totally see why you and other people would feel that way, especially if, like, you're not kind of looking for kind of an encyclopedic kind of thing. That's kind of what this is more than. Well, and also,
and the fact that
it's definitely not really a story.
And the fact that so much of it is false and inaccuracies.
Well, I'm not choosing to believe that quite yet. But you may be right. But if that happens, if it turns out that's the case, my opinion will probably drop a bit somewhat, because
I agree with that.
Some of it right now is that it's amplifying and building on the Twin Peaks universe. If it turns out, well, just kidding, Richard Nixon and Jackie Gleason were never there, like, you know. And that's the other thing, too. I think you have to kind of take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, because some of this stuff is very silly. And it's fun to me. Like, it's silly in a fun way. Not so much like some of the Season 2 stuff I don't like, but more like the late Season 2 stuff, where they're, like, going in Owl Cave, and it's a little Indiana Jones and Legend of Idle Temple. It's a little funny, but it's fun, you know? There's this kind of fun quality to it.
It's not Little Nicky, it's Owl Cave.
Yeah, exactly. This book is not Little Nicky,
yeah, but
it's Owl
you know,
Cave.
but you know what? The show presented these weird things in an interesting light. And to me, I was going through this book, and, you know, again, everybody has their own opinion on it. That's great. I'm just saying, for me, I'm just reading this, and the whole reason that anybody is picking up this book is because it says Twin Peaks on that cover, and Mark Frost is writing it. That's it. And you have to wade through a whole lot of stuff to even get some nuggets of anything. And that's.
I actually I like all that stuff.
But you're an academic, and so is.
I'm not an academic. I haven't been in school for like
but your videos are very much about the details and pointing out, studying things, right? And same thing with Eric too. I mean, your blogs just kind of really get into stuff and analyze. And you were very big into Fringe and Lost, and that was all about the intricacies and the conspiracies. And
but that's Frost, I think, don't you? That's his side of things.
No, I agree. And again,
Lynch is more the sort
Firewalk with Me was
inside your
Firewalk with Me was Lynch's.
Frost is the thoughts in your head that you're kind of.
That's true. But when you see Frost's episodes that he writes or the one he directed, he still struck that balance. And what I'm seeing in this book is the Mark Frost of today, being a novelist, being a screenwriter of movies, as opposed to the Frost that was well tapped into Twin Peaks in 1990-91. I think that he's been out of Twin Peaks for a long time.
I think as early as season 2, though, he was branching out, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. But I think as early as that, he's getting away from kind of that honed-in, focused aspect. And I think he's really the one who broadens the horizons on season 2, which, leads to some not-so-good stuff, but also sets the stage for the show to be able to come back now. Because with all resolving Laura's mystery and then introducing the Lodge mythos and turning Cooper into a character who actually is flawed and can fall and all this, all of which I would attribute way more to Frost. Without that stuff, there's no expanded Twin Peaks. There's nothing coming back. There's no Firewalk with Me, ironically. That's the twist.
Joel, could I just ask about, in terms of Mark Frost as an author and things like that? I tried to start reading the list of, but it was very, very much a version perhaps that Cameron might like better, like very much a verbal sort of page turner airport novel, but set in Victorian England and stuff. And I just couldn't really, I wasn't sort of pulled in by it. I mean, it was all Arthur Conan Doyle and people rushing about, and I was sort of, do you have to be into that? I mean, have you read that? I presume you've read that book from what you were saying, is it good if you're a fan of The Greatest Game Ever Played, which was made into a film with Shia LaBeouf, and which would be better for you to enjoy The Secret History of Twin Peaks? Because reading a novel all about golf is not my idea of big fun, really. But
just real quick,
I never read that one.
Brett Buchanan.
I only read List of Seven, and I saw Storyville and 2 or 3 episodes of Hill Street Blues, but it's really hard. It's all on DVD, but you can't get it on Netflix.
Did you read The List of Seven then? You said you read The List of Seven. You liked it or what?
No, I mean, I definitely read it because it was Mark Frost. It's probably not. I don't read that much fiction to begin with, and I definitely don't read that much sort of adventure, swashbuckling action type of stuff.
But was it an interesting book or what? I mean,
but
it was okay.
So, real quick, in the chat, we got Brett Buchanan, who, of course, is the...
I will say this. Sorry, Fantastic Four is terrible.
And he came back... Hey,
I tried to pretend
and he came... No, he came back to write part 2 as well, Rise of the Silver Surfer. So, okay, so let's just... So you can't just say, he got rewritten in the first film. He came back for the sequel as well. Brett Buchanan, who is the editor-in-chief over at the website Alternative Nation, writes in the chat room, the only relevant stuff in the book to him is that he feels Evil Cooper probably killed Major Briggs. Tamara Preston is probably going to be played by Naomi Watts. And then somebody else in the chat board, this is interesting, he says that based off the possible inaccuracies in the book, he thinks season 3 will be like the end of Mulholland Drive after Diane wakes up. That we'll just get a whole new real reality.
Maybe.
That's an interesting point.
Raymond,
I think already
go ahead.
Firewalk with Me is a little bit like that. It has that element of not in the sense of actually contradicting narrative detail, except for the little things that you pointed out.
Right.
But just in that sense of here's the dark psychological reality behind the mythical stuff.
With all the things changed around.
But they take that idea even further and actually apply it to a Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, alternate, or Inland Empire, obviously.
But Joel, you and I have talked at great length about how you were the one that even brought it up to me. You said that if you think about it, Fire Walk with Me is what introduces so much mythology into Twin Peaks that the series never gets into. So, I mean, real quick for the viewers, tell us about some of the mythology that you feel the movie brings in that the show doesn't touch on. Go ahead.
Well, Garmin Bosia, obviously, the ring, all the Jeffrey stuff, the notion of like the Blue Rose cases and stuff like that, but really more to do with Bob and Mike and the idea that like the little man is his arm, and kind of taking these images that were on the show but were very undefined and setting them within some kind of I don't know what I call it exactly. Like a specific mythology where they have a purpose and an aim, and it's to collect the pain and the sorrow of the people and all of that.
And we're introduced to Annie. We're introduced to Annie saying that the good Dale's in the lodge. You know, that was something that.
That I think that's true because that's not totally clear from the finale. That's almost something that's a little kind of left over from the show because I think it's the only time they refer to the lodge in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think there's a lot of
brand new character.
It follows
Life guy. I hope he comes back
on the implications of the show and actually kind of makes them explicit. Like, oh, here's how the characters, the spirits, are interrelated, and here's how they relate to the Laura mystery and the Teresa. I mean, it's easy to forget too that based on the show, the Teresa thing is just kind of this random add-on. It's like, oh, and Bob killed the girl a year earlier and put a letter under her finger. And that's it. It's really the movie that gives us a motive and a reason why Teresa died and what it actually has to do with Laura. And, you know, Through the Ring kind of makes that all central. So interestingly, like I said, the ring is in the book.
Well,
that whole
I think Frost added that begrudgingly.
The whole idea of pain and sorrow and love versus fear as the gates to the lodge, which is like the core. If you're going to define the ethics of like Twin Peaks, that's the stuff you're going to talk about. That's not so much in the book, really, which is interesting.
Go ahead, Eric.
I've grown to like Fire Walk with Me, but I don't know. I actually think that the movie tends to muddy the mythology more than expand upon it. Like I sort of felt like the run of what it was like maybe those 7 or 8 final episodes of season 2, as well as the big icon episodes throughout the earlier part, really hit on the mythology. But like I was starting to get like a sense, and then especially revealing this idea of a white lodge and a black lodge, and that the Red Room of Cooper's Dream is an actual place, and like you were talking about, how do you get in there? Oh, you got to use the fear, and the planets need to be lining up. Like I feel like I was starting to get an understanding of like what was going on. And then the movie comes on like along and kind of just like smashes it and knocks it right over. Because like, while yes, the movie does make it a lot clearer that like the little man and Mike, like the little man is some sort of personification of his arm. Like the whole concept of like the Garmin Bosia, like to me that just kind of like muddies it. Like I still, even now, I know it's defined as like pain and sorrow, but like it's confusing to me as to like, well, why do Mike and the little man want it, need it? The one-armed man seemed to be trying to stop Bob, and here, like, and that's another thing. Like he knows who he's seen Leland. He knows who he is. Now that's just a continuity thing that maybe you can just kind of ignore. But the scene over the convenience store, I don't know. Again, I like the movie. I think it has a very good end, a very emotional end, and it kind of creates a loop. But I don't know. I think Lynch unhinged from Frost. What you get is a film like Fire Walk with Me, which again, and it's interesting, but
and now we have a book of Frost unhinged from Lynch, and
it basically makes no sense.
Yeah, the job in the finale too, because remember how much he changed it. The finale in the film, it's easy to forget that before that point, Bob and Little Man and Mike and all that, they're dead ends basically. Frost drops him so he can talk about the Lodge and Project Blue Book. And now he kind of does it again in the book a little bit. So I think for me, I look at the finale in the film and I say, Lynch is taking those those images and those characters that define Twin Peaks for the first half, and tying them to the concepts that defined it for the second half. Whether or not in the film it's not as explicit as it is in the finale. In the finale, it's fairly obvious. He's like, Black Lodge equals Red Room. You know, that's pretty.
Even bringing in Ronette Pulaski at the end to remind you of her character.
And the log lady comes back and gives the motor oil. It's like he hits every button for it in a very diligent way, which is why it's kind of interesting to me that this guy we all kind of see as like this spontaneous painter who's not that concerned with tying up narrative loose and is actually much more kind of diligent about tying everything back to the beginning than Frost sometimes seems to be. It seems like Frost is on that ongoing series trajectory where he just kind of like keep going, bring in a new element, something new, bring something new in, and then Lynch brings it back home in a way. So I'll get to see what from the book actually is in the new series and how Lynch handles it.
Those parts with Ronette Pulaski and the motor oil, like Lynch directed that episode, and I'm sure he might have done some sort of tweaking of the story, but my understanding was that like the big like hand Lynch had in like changing that episode was really the end, the confrontation, if you can call it that, in the Black Lodge. But I think the black motor oil and Ronette Pulaski, like I think that was in their script.
No, it wasn't. Not in the script, and the log lady wasn't either.
Really?
And, the whole diner scene wasn't in the script, so like Mrs. Palmer coming. It really is like I thought the same thing, but I went back and looked at it maybe like a year ago or something, and I was surprised. Like a lot of the early scenes are changed too. There's stuff that's in there, but pretty much everything that ties into the pilot was Lynch's addition. Except I got this wrong in my video, so I have to correct it here. It's like, oh, now she's interested in Cooper again. I thought that was something he added, but actually that was in the script. But like all the other stuff was like him, like putting a button on it. All these actors who like weren't supposed to be in it. Like Mrs. Palmer, her last line on the series was actually going to be way back in the wake scene where she says, "I don't want to forget or I want to remember all of this." And then they're like, "Okay, let's cut her." Which kind of cracks me up a little bit on the nose. But yeah, so I mean, I give Lynch credit for kind of bringing it back home, but I give Frost credit. Whoa. I don't know what that feedback is. Do I sound better now?
It sounds the same. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I give Frost credit for escalating it, because I feel like with Lynch, he's brilliant at making these films that sort of stand alone, and they have that, like, you don't really have to understand what's going on. They don't have to go to a certain point. You can just speculate on them endlessly. But Twin Peaks is a TV show. It's like 30 episodes. It would have been even longer if it could have been. And I think Frost is the one who kind of took it new places, and then Lynch is forced to deal with it. Like, okay, now we've got a lodge. What does that mean? Okay, now Cooper's going to fall, and how do I justify that? Okay, now Laura's mystery is resolved. How can I bring her back into it? So that's where I see, like, the collaboration of this kind of relay race. And I'm just curious how that's going to play out now that they're working together. Although the fact that you have Frost making this book on his own kind of adds it.
Joel, Debbie, curious. I've always heard that if season 3 had happened back in '91, that they were expecting to get Cooper out of the lodge pretty fast. So my question is, do you think in this new series, are we building up to Cooper coming out? Do you think it's going to happen at the end of the first episode, or do you think it's going to be a build? Or are we even going to deal with that? And the Cooper's just already out, and we, somehow in the 25 years, and we didn't see it. How do you think they're going to address that? Debbie, I'll start with you.
I can't imagine them having many episodes without Kyle in it. So I think we're going to see Cooper pretty quickly.
I don't think Kyle wouldn't be in it. I think the question is whether or not who we'll see will be Dale Cooper, not Doppelganger.
Or Doppelganger, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from the way he looks in some of the shots that we've seen, it doesn't seem like the Dale that we know and love, does it?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna suggest that it's his Doppelganger that's out and about.
So do you think that, like, for instance, we've talked about before on this podcast recently that if there are indeed 18 episodes, they're probably going to do 9 and 9. So we have 2 seasons, so that because Showtime's not going to want people to subscribe only to be.
Feelings about that.
Yeah, well, I don't think Showtime wants people to subscribe and then ditch it after 1 year. So by splitting it 9 and 9 with a volume 2 book in between, I think that's probably what's going to happen. But what I'm saying is, do you think the end of season 3, part 1, or however they call it, is going to be Cooper coming out of the lodge, or do you think he's going to be out before those first 9 episodes, if they do indeed go that route? I mean, how long are they going to keep Cooper in the lodge? Is he the payoff, or is that just the beginning of the story?
I thought he's already out.
I wouldn't even want to guess at that. That's one of those questions that I don't know. I just wouldn't even want to guess where they're going to go. Yeah. And the book certainly hasn't helped in that direction, has it?
Yeah. I sincerely hope he isn't already out. Because, I mean, I think the payoff, and even Frost has alluded to it in interviews, that line, "I'll see you again in 25 years, would seem to indicate like that's a moment that's been like coming for a long time. We don't know what she means by that exactly, but
even
I would
27 years now.
Well, even in the original ending of the pilot for Overseas, it makes it very clear that it's 25 years later, and it presents itself as an actual place.
Right.
So I think,
go ahead, Joel.
I don't care. I personally don't care necessarily if he's out of the lodge at the beginning or halfway through at the end. I think the important thing for me, the whole series, all 18 episodes, I think need to deal with what happened in the finale. It can't be like resolved and on to something new. Like that, I don't see any way around that being the heart of season 3, 4, whatever we've got, whatever they just shot. Because that not only is that like the most memorable thing that happens post Laura, it makes it seem like everything's leading up to that, even if it wasn't originally. It also is perfectly in line with all of Lynch's work since.
How much time do you spend thinking about what happened 25 years ago, though? As a fan, I agree. I would like it to be that way. But I just think from a narrative perspective, well, again, it is going to have to deal with some of that fallout. I just don't think that this new series is going to dwell much beyond some references and some talking about maybe the long-lasting effects. But, you know, we're not going to be getting like a point-by-point recap or like a addressment of – that's not a word – having it addressed that – like those events transpired. It's been 25 years. I mean, the town is going to have moved on.
We have a comment. We have a comment in the chat board that says their biggest problem with the book is that Twin Peaks, the town, has lost its special status as a singular place of weirdness, supernatural phenomena. Now that these places seem to be all over the world.
I'd agree with that. And that was actually my joke at James, which he kind of chided me for. But Twin Peaks is not in the. It is in the book, and obviously it does feature in the book for at least more than half of it, but it's not in the book all that much. I mean, you're following Milford around New Mexico and Midwest and all these other places for so long.
And we do know the new series is not going to just stay in the town.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's right.
So, what?
I just want to clarify. When I said the last episode, I don't mean all the like Nadine and Ben and all that stuff. I just mean the Cooper and Bob, and or the split in Cooper. I think that's got to be the through line for all 18 episodes, in whatever fashion. Whether it's like he gets out and he's got to reconcile, or he's still in there and there's a struggle. Frost said something when the show was coming back, like the thing we learned from the first series. But you got to stick to that through line. You can have detours and go off on little tangents, but you got to have that one path through the woods that you stick to. And I would assume that path has got to be the struggle in Cooper. You know.
I liked it how in the teaser the Showtime dropped, the 2-minute one, where Miguel Ferrer says that Lynch said to him, "You know all those rumors about Twin Peaks coming back? They're all true." And how long did you hear maybe 3 years or so before that it was going to come back, and everyone online was saying wishful thinking, Lynch has moved on, it's never going to happen. But obviously, they had been planning it. It was true.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
So James is going a little crazy over there with his camera, and
I don't know what he's doing.
This is an actual picture of Twin Peaks here, and I just thought that this podcast we could do a competition where I'll get this signed by Mark Frost and David Lynch, who writes in and offers up an explanation of the animal life utterance. They will win this, signed by Mark Frost and David Lynch. And trust me, I will, by hook or by crook, find a way, actively, without deciding to burn books in a tar pit, blade innocence on top of it. I will do that. So I have to write to them using a pen. And, I've not used a pen now for probably 10 years due to being an unemployed layabout scumbag. So I will try and do that. So we need an explanation for animal life.
Well, Eric, you're definitely unique amongst all of us because you actually live in Snoqualmie.
That's right.
2 minutes or so from.
Is that true, or is that also fake, Eric, like the book?
I'm trying to throw you off, James. I don't want you to find me.
Is it all done by CGI? And you knew my plans. I was saving up my pennies. I'm going to fly out to the States. Where's Eric Bruce?
Raymond in the chat says James is clearly annoyed on this podcast. James, are you annoyed?
Yeah, I am very, very annoyed. I mean, I don't know. I feel like an Incredible Hulk moment could happen any moment, really, and I'll start getting grab my TV and smash it with my head. Could happen any moment.
A lot of people did that during the presidential debate.
Oh, Trump is in the book,
Yeah.
Did you catch that?
I caught it in the audio book. I didn't catch it while reading it.
Yeah.
Like I was it was weird. It hit my ear the right way. And I was like, wait, what was that? And then I went back.
For those watching, tell us a little bit about that.
So, Cameron, apparently your favorite part of the book when we're learning essentially about Lana and some theories about, was she actually sent to kill Douglas Milford? We find out what happens to her post-series, and apparently she moves back to the East Coast, I guess like New Hampshire or something, but she's in New York for a while, and she dates I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing, but that for some reason I didn't catch it while reading it. I caught it while listening. It was like a strangely coiffed real estate tycoon before eventually marrying some other guy. But that's Frost has acknowledged he has a Trump reference, and
that made me angry as well because I am a big fan of Donald Trump. So.
I got it. I can tell you because I got it open to the page.
Well, but there's that whole part in the show too where they imply that she's some sort of like witch or something, even though she's like this normal girl. Just the fact that like every man just drops everything and just gazes upon her.
They're clearly fans of Teen Witch.
Yeah.
Okay, ready?
To me and say stop criticizing Robin Lively because they liked her in Savannah, honestly. So, and Ray Wise was in that as well, apparently. I mean, that's the kind of show I know that you're into, Cameron. You probably would like a book tie-in better than this one that came out.
My critique is not about Robin Lively
or remembrance of the show Savannah.
I've never seen it.
Are you lying now?
Hang on, Joel, go ahead.
She allegedly fled to the Hamptons and briefly dated a bizarrely coiffed real estate mogul before marrying a hedge fund manager.
Yep, that was it.
So, only one bizarrely coiffed real estate mogul I can think of. So, welcome to Twin Peaks, Trump.
Oh God, Debbie,
he is like a Twin Peaks character.
I was actually reminded.
Hang on a second, Debbie. What do you think of all this nerd talk we're going about?
I'm having my own nerd thoughts because when you're talking about Lana Milford, I'm just thinking about this strange red-headed woman in the book, that Jack Parsons' wife, is it? Who escapes
Oh yeah.
after he's killed, and I think there's maybe a sort of redhead connection there. I don't know. So I'm having my own geeky thoughts to myself here.
Lost in JP writes in the chat, it's not going to shock him if a character from the original series that was not crucial comes on now in season 3 with new and important dimensions, which I think is kind of the point of the whole book. I mean, the fact that we're dealing with the Milfords and Andrew Packard, and because they were so old, basically, that would take us through the whole history of the last 100 years of the town. That's who they had to go through. But yeah, I mean, like, because if you think about it, Dwayne Milford doesn't even show up until Leland Palmer's wake in the series, and even then, he's out in one episode. So, I mean, the fact that there's a big chunk of the book talking about him and his brother, it's I think that's where we're heading. Not necessarily in the new show, but in terms of taking things people we've heard about or seen about, it's kind of like hearing about Sam Stanley in the pilot and then seeing him in the Fire Walk with Me. So,
and learning what happened to him sort of in the book.
True.
Yeah.
What were we going to say?
Which I thought was just kind of a cheap way to get rid of Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah. What were you going to say, James?
I'm just putting on one of my favorite episodes now, Dispute Between Brothers, where you get to see some elderly gentlemen brutally kicking each other in the legs. And then also the highly erotically charged image of Nadine, see her pants in her shoes. I mean, the screen is paused during that part, but I'm just trying to study this because I am an academic.
I've driven on that road.
James, you have to do me a favor. I hate to say this, but you're gonna have to turn that off, or at least turn your camera. Otherwise, YouTube's gonna cite this for copyright.
Well, could have just half of it, maybe.
No.
All right, I'll just glimpse it out of the corner of my eye, and then maybe show you fleeting glimpses of when we get Nadine's shoes. It's like
that scene. While that scene is very entertaining, it is so.
He's not.
Listen. It is so.
I'm making a joke about it because I remember when it was on. I was like,
yeah, but let me tell you, James.
If this is the direction this show is going to go,
James, that scene is one of the worst in continuity I've ever seen in any TV show or movie. I mean, if you watch the background of that scene, Donna comes up to Ed.
I know that drew me up the wall when I saw it when I was 14.
I noticed that when it was on TV. I mean, it was very apparent that they had all these characters in the background just not even matching, and then it would cut to when Donna is going up to Ed or whatever. It would then cut later, and then she's approaching Ed. It's ridiculous.
Honestly, when I was 14, I never noticed any of that. Did you? Or I mean,
yes, I did.
Ed was probably lying on the sofa, like out of his mind, drunk or something, threatening to kill me with an axe. But
this is what I would do, James.
I watched the show.
I would record an episode, and then the next week before the
I recorded them.
Okay, well, the next week before the next episode aired, around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, I would rewatch the previous 3 or 4 episodes to get me geared up for the new episode. So I saw that episode a lot.
On BBC Two here, they repeated it on a Saturday usually, and even sometimes on an afternoon. I was like, and then there was that scene where Harry was him and punching her in the guts and stuff, showing in the afternoon. I was like, bloody Nora. I didn't know I was going to get this beautiful entertainment, which is bringing out my violent side as a teenager, and so after when I saw that, I went out and punched a woman right in the guts, So, but in this one, when I saw this, I was like, Jesus Christ! It's like Cooper's going on about, really bad thing happened to your husband and everything, Sarah, and everything, and it just all seemed so forced.
Well, the thing that I always found so amazing about that scene is here is a wake for a confessed serial killer child rapist, and everybody in town's there to celebrate.
Yeah, that doesn't seem likely.
I still wonder if the actors knew whose funeral they were at. Because a few people are missing. Ben's missing. Bob.
Andy's not there. I mean, Andy should have been there, like crying or
Yeah,
something.
could have been Andy.
Crying into the. I always remember that shot of the potato salad, and it makes me think of Go on My Mercy or something. But it's like it's one of these hellish foodstuffs, and you're like, because you just want to keep eating it until you like explode. But at the same time, it feels like really bad to be eating such a thing. You know, like murdering your own daughter or something. And then, you know, I thought that was the effect they were trying to give in that episode. I can't remember who directed this one. Maybe it was Caleb
It's
Descandle.
possible that the people didn't know the raping part. Not that the murdering part is any better, but like
I think a lot of it was there in the subtext, like the implication, you know, with the shot of
And
shoes and things like that.
and
I
they
mean,
do-
she's supposed to be like she's supposed to be a girl. Joke about the idea that she's like underage, and you know she's looking at her pants and stuff. It's all.
And they didn't
Find it, you know.
they didn't like sweep that under the rug, kind of like, you know, the way New Line Cinema did with Freddy Krueger, where they kind of erased the child molester part. Because in the previous episode, before the wake, in the last scene, Cooper says, "Does it make you feel any better that a man would rape and kill his own daughter?" I mean, so they bring it back.
right.
But in a way, that's kind of saying that the whole like possession angle and Bob and aliens or whatever you want to say, it's just a way of basically avoiding, you know, the harsh truth in a way. Really, it's just
The evil that men do. That's what Albert says.
What did you guys think about the book in terms of how it kind of? I mean, because that's a good point. There's a lot of people have sort of felt like, well, what is Twin Peaks? Is it like an allegory to these psychological social problems, or is it all about the sort of supernatural, mystical stuff? So obviously, the book kind of leans heavily on that latter aspect. Did you feel? So how did you feel it kind of played into the balance you had in your head from the show and Fire Walk with Me and all that stuff? Did it kind of tip the scale toward a different reading of Twin Peaks, or no? Or did it kind of just
the book made me wonder what the hell's going to be happening in the new show. Really, that's all. I mean,
Yeah.
it gave me any massive insight into the previous two seasons more. It was more like I'm just looking ahead and that's it, really. These days, I don't really look back on the old show that much because sometimes when I go back and look at it now, I'm so familiar with it. It just seems like with having a widescreen TV, and I'm like, shall I blow this up and just lose half of the image, and you know, all that kind of aspect of it. And I just wish it was the old one. I can't completely forgive its limitations sometimes.
Josh in the chat says he thinks the whole series, at least this whole first 9 episodes, will be the central mystery will be about getting Cooper out of the lodge, because maybe people won't know that he is the doppelganger. So that might be.
But I know I'm making these jokes, but
go ahead, Joel.
Well, I think we talked about this before. To me, the trickiest thing is it's one thing to end the show the way it quote unquote ended, even though it wasn't necessarily supposed to be an ending, where it's like, oh my God, he sees Bob, and now he's the real Coop. That's not the real Coop. The real Coop is somewhere else. But if you're going to have a whole show about that character, it's got to be a little more complex. It's sort of like how in Firewalk with Me, they go in and you see this Leland who's like more complicit, and there's more of a sort of a gray area between him and Bob, and that's much more dramatically compelling, I think. And I feel like with Cooper, you're stuck with that same issue. If they just try and stick with, oh no, this isn't real Cooper, this is a totally different, weird, evil spirit that is inhabiting in his body, I'm not sure that's really going to resonate as an ongoing thing in the series. So,
but if the show, but if the show begins,
it's also very different.
But if the show begins,
it's also very different from how Lynch treats the subject in like Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, where it's all about the characters kind of being enmeshed in this larger universe, but being responsible for their actions, and it's always this overlap between the person and the spirit, and, you know. So for that case with Cooper, though, it kind of contradicts what the finale implies, and even Firewalk with Me and the Missing Pieces kind of imply, which is like, oh no, this is a totally separate, like, double. This isn't the real Cooper. The real Cooper's in the lodge.
Yeah.
So,
I was knocking Firewalk with Me.
How they make that good drama?
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Well, I was not just because what Joel's saying is actually, I think, a spot-on comment. I was knocking Fire Walk with Me a little bit earlier, but I would note that one thing I actually rather liked about it was its treatment of Leland Palmer, because like Joel's saying, like the character of Leland, the show, and it could just have been how they had to do it on like network TV to be clear to, you know, an audience whose intelligence they questioned. But like it's pretty clear, like there's good Leland, and then there's, you know, Leland when Bob is in the driver's seat, and like, you know, poor old Leland is just there, and he learns after the fact all these terrible things he's done. Firewalk with Me seems a lot more ambiguous about that subject, because, and particularly the missing pieces shed more light on this. Like you start, you know, it seems like Teresa was trying to find out who Leland was, and that she had figured out he was Laura's father, and, you know, who knows what she might have tried to do, blackmail him or whatever. And so I think the question really comes up for me after seeing that, like, did Bob kill Teresa, or did Leland, or were they, you know, was there some kind of a symbiosis there in that, you know, maybe Bob got the thrill from it, but Leland wasn't like the passive participant.
Well, he says
the show leads him to believe.
He says on his deathbed, they made me kill that girl, Teresa. They.
Right.
So, but who knows? Who knows? But I mean, to me, Fire Walk with Me, I mean, I don't want to get into this, but just the fact that it seems with a few moments here and there, Leland is Bob that entire movie. I mean, that he's just, because they left in just the darker aspects of that character, except for a few choice little moments. I think the missing pieces fleshes it out a bit more. But, you know, I know a lot of people have been writing in saying that what they don't want is the show to begin with another body wrapped in plastic washing up. That would just make them seriously upset.
But then again, they want to get ready.
Well, yeah. We can probably say with some confidence that that's not going to be the case. So, you know, from what we know of,
well, yeah,
stuff happening on the set. So,
well, Josh in the comments says Cooper has more influence in the world and can travel basically more places than Leland did, so his exploits will be more widespread.
Yeah, more like the which is a brilliant comparison, I think, the whole idea you came up with of, and you may have given Frost ideas on this, just as I gave him with my obsession with the film Watcher in the Woods, which is referenced at the end of this book. So you can imagine that he probably saw what we were talking about and then shoved it in there at the end. I'm joking at this point when James Marshall says he's a big fan of it. But, you know, it's just... Someone says, "Hey, I need to drop," from Eric. Oh, right, sorry.
Eric's leaving. Thank you, Eric, for coming.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the invite.
Of course.
I'm going to take this moment to bow out as well, guys. Thanks so much for...
All right, feel better. Thanks for coming on sick.
Yeah, I mean, I could go for a little longer, but I'm going to have to probably take care of some stuff soon.
This is what happens when I mentioned the film The Watcher in the Woods, and that's not even what I was coming to. What I wanted to talk about was, and that's not a joke completely, because things, it does bear comparison. I will say the final conflict one, though, is one I enjoy probably the most, because like the idea that Cooper was chosen, and the book does this as well, and it answers one question you were bringing up, Joel, which is a good one. Like, how did the book change your opinion on Cooper, maybe, I mean, or anyone? He knew a little bit more than we think about. He knew once in the town, because the thing is, we've noted this before, he's arriving in the town a lot earlier than what would be, you know, and having an early lunch as well. They're at 11:30 at Lamplighter Inn or whatever. It's like he's always early. He's always there before. It's like he has some second sight or second knowledge from the FBI. They're telling him, get to this town now. This is a Blue Rose case, you know, blah, blah, blah. How the heck could he get there that fast? And it's the same thing in these post-Leyland death episodes. It's like, if you look at the way Cooper's behaving and the way he looks at Major Briggs and things, it's like maybe the idea was we're supposed to think either there are two Coopers, like, you know, kind of going around somehow in some weird way connected to the lodge, or, you know, one of those Coopers was like an alien possessed one, because the way he suddenly just starts talking to episode, and then the way he starts talking when he's about being supposed to be handing over his badge and all that business, he really does act as if, as Cameron has described him, alien Coop, you know.
Well, the thing that's so bizarre is that they so tipped their hand because in the Tim Hunter episode where Leland dies at the end, and they're talking about the evil that men do, and Harry says, but if he was here, we had him trapped. Where's Bob now? And the next cut is Cooper before it goes to the owl. And I thought, I just thought that when Cooper was holding on to Leland, maybe I thought at first, when I first saw the show, that there was a transfer of spirit, kind of like in The Exorcist, right? Go ahead, Joel.
So I'm probably going to have to check out Reunited too as well.
Okay.
But I just wanted to sort of in closing say one of the things we didn't talk about at all but that was interesting to me is how they definitely went back and they tried to root a lot of stuff in the Native American like legends and lore. And I thought it was kind of odd because I always just assumed that the spirits took on the appearance of whatever time they were in. Like obviously Bob's not wearing a jean jacket in like 1600, but they make a point of like, oh no, there's these like white spirits. I was like, oh, that's kind of odd. I don't even know if that was necessary. It felt a little bit over the top almost. But
what white Indians?
It was interesting to see them kind of put the roots back into that idea of like, oh, these are old spirits, legends that are, echoing in the modern.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, okay, Lost and JP, he writes something that we've been talking about for a long time on this podcast about it's possible the events of the original series all conspired to get Cooper to the town specifically for that purpose. And I agree because according to the series, Laura had the dream about the Red Room the night before she died. The fact that according to Fire Walk with Me, Chet Desmond is captured. Philip Jeffries has been taken. So obviously the Black Lodger and those inhabitants definitely had a soft spot. They definitely had a soft spot for FBI agents, and Cooper would be the most powerful one because he would be able to, with his mind, be able to know a lot of different things. So, and then obviously with the original intent of Fire Walk with Me dealing with Eisenhower and that type of stuff, and then obviously this book going into history, it seems to be that like the Black Lodge wants like sort of like world domination in terms of like American politics, like Damien in the final conflict.
If the Black Lodge still exists, we don't know from this book. It may have been written out like Annie.
Or even better, Omen 4: The Awakening.
Yeah.
I just hope the new show is.
Well, before you go, Joel, I just want to say this last comment here from Adamo. He writes, I hope Lara Flynn Boyle is in the show in a scene where they find a hidden letter S underneath her liposuction.
Ouch.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for joining.
I always said, I'll make this my last comment. I always said I would like to have Lara Flynn Boyle and Moira Kelly both in it as doppelganger versions of Laura. I mean, of Donna.
Yeah.
Obviously.
That would be fantastic.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
They're both behind dumpsters, behind the double R, both of them.
Yeah.
And then they just both have a gratuitous nude scene, or later on in the series.
Just remake Mulholland Drive, basically.
What, you want?
I'll talk to you guys later.
Take it easy.
Lesbian bum action.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right. Joel wants to see, so we can say that the esteemed academic Joel Bocco wants Naomi Watts and Lara Flynn Boyle dressed as bums, covered in dirt.
What?
That's what he said. He said he wanted to see them in lesbian action, Naomi Watts and Lara Flynn Boyle. So that will happen probably in season 4. And now, Cameron, that you want to see those episodes directed by Mark Frost, or are you worried that they'll just be a long history lesson,
Yeah, I don't want Twin Peaks to feel like C-SPAN.
C-SPAN?
Yeah. It's sort of like it's like a government channel where you just watch like Senate hearings and stuff like that.
Cooper just pointing to boards and saying, I've got something to tell you about Tibet. Again.
Hey, well, at least when he does that whole Tibet speech in the show, it's fascinating, and you understand why everyone sits forward and listens.
True, I will say you're right, but I think if you watch the film version of the book directed by David Lynch, you'd probably find it quite enjoyable. In some respects, but
sure. Sure, or at
Lynch
least,
would
or even Diane Keaton. Well, even Diane Keaton with all those dissolves, I'm sure that it would make the book 10 times better.
But I mean, I still stand by what I said about a book and the series being completely different things. And
but don't you think the book? I mean, I know you really love to like analyze and get into details and stuff. I'm just saying that the book is kind of a slog to get through.
I don't know. I mean, I don't really mind because it's like I've only spent a small amount of money on it, and it's of a slog if you approach it as a novel because, you know, the fact that it's written a novel on the front cover even seems like a bit of a sort of a jokey thing, you know.
Brett Buchanan in the chat says Mark Frost should have just written 50 Shades of Hurley, a James and Evelyn spinoff.
Yeah, I don't know how well that would sell. Like, really, I mean, in the UK especially, I went into a Waterstones here and there were only 2 copies, you know, on release day. So I mean, and I was lucky to even get one of them. But release spin-off, I'm not really sure there would be a demand for it, even if it featured, you know, Hurley being whipped or something. So I don't know. You need to ask some people who are into like sex novels and stuff what they think about that.
Semper Collis says Diane Keaton did a great job in directing. She just had a horrible script. We've actually done a commentary for that episode.
Well, I won't go that far. I mean, I think that some of the directing was she spliffing up in the editing suite or what? Because I mean, it was like her just going, yeah, we'll do more slow motion, you know.
I mean, you can say there's lesser episodes of Twin Peaks, but I don't think there's a single like full-on bad episode, start to finish, where it's just awful.
No, not in terms of direction. It's more just it is to do with the stories that are focused on, and you know, when it's all stuff to do with the mill or, you know, I was never really a big fan of Ben's breakdown sort of story myself. But
no, but you know what? But if you look at those scenes, Ben's breakdown, even though it is silly and stuff, as scenes, they're very well acted, written. I mean, they are amusing.
Yeah, but some of them just go on for so long. Yeah. They are. I mean, literally, they feel like. I mean, at least 10 minutes. Some of them. I mean, maybe they're not that long, but they feel like.
I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that
because it's Twin Peaks turning on itself. It's like very out there anymore. It's not about the whole Laura Palmer mystery. It's like we're just supposed to be really bothered about the fact that on into this, you know,
right.
delusion, and so I just didn't really understand what.
But like the book, it's Mark Frost doing kind of a revisionist history so that the South wins the war. So Ben Hur can kind of come out of his delusion and feel like a different person. So in a way, you know, this book dealing with like alternate histories and things and dates and stuff is something that was played with in the original series. But at least there is that. Things were entertaining, though. That's what I'm saying. This book feels like
people rewrite their own history, don't they? You know.
Yeah, but I mean, this book, whether you like it or don't like it, I just feel like it feels like that I have to go to class, but the details inside, I wouldn't mind that so much if I felt like what I was reading was relevant. And I feel, and if it was like, even if it was just kind of nonsense throughout the whole book, that's one thing. But I mean, there are 15, 20 pages sometimes you go through and you go, am I reading a book about Richard Nixon? I mean, or Lewis and Clark, or am I reading about Twin Peaks? And I think sometimes Frost is so long-winded
explicitly just about Twin Peaks.
That he's so long-winded that, to quote you, sometimes I feel like Frost lost the plot of what he was doing.
Well, the thing is, there isn't really a one forward driving plot, is there, in the book? It's more just literally which a novel should generally have. I mean, not that I'm saying, you know, it's a rule, but it's not like reading Great Expectations by Charles Dickens or something, which we see separately on 2 occasions at least in Twin Peaks, read by Catherine, and also it's by Dale's bedside. So, you know, it's not a novel by any means. It's just a dossier. And, you know, what I wanted to say about this whole thing of, you know, Ben's delusion, I mean, all the characters are kind of delusional in some way, perhaps. And, you know, Cooper's so-called possession by Bob and things like that, and the way Lynch phrases it, especially at the end, he says part of Cooper is with Bob. That's not all of Cooper. That's just what half of him.
Right.
I mean, that's just another way, basically, in language of just saying, you know, Cooper is split in terms of in his mind. You know, he's lost his mind. He's delusional. He's gone crazy because of all of the stress he's under. That's that. If you want to view it without any supernatural aspects whatsoever, that's my view anyway. That how you can take it.
Do you? Well, someone in the chat wants.
That's the way the new show might go. You know, I think
someone in the chat wants to know. Do you think that since we've seen the Black Lodge, do you think in this new series at any point will we see the White Lodge?
Probably. I mean, I think the new show, the way it approaches the lodges and the Red Room and stuff, not wise on Lynch's part to just constantly repeat the same shots of the zigzag floor and the red curtains and things. I mean, obviously they're iconic and need to be in there, perhaps, but to add other things to that would be a good thing. And I mean, I think we should try and put our viewers, you know, a bit of a challenge for the next, say, 2 years or whatever. And, you know, as a Lynch scholar and film scholar, you know, I've got a large collection of VHS tapes. And over the next 500 days, I'm going to try and watch 500 movies and try and find things that have influenced Lynch in them. Watcher in the Woods.
Yeah. You think every
Watcher in the Woods is one I think that... No, Watcher in the Woods and Exorcist 2 are ones I would recommend starting with if you've got those on VHS. And Watcher in the Woods features backwards talk, backwards language, you know, the coming together of the sun and the moon and different planetary alignments, the eclipse, a very blonde-haired girl, Holly Johnson or somebody else. No, that's... She was like a skater, figure skater. She recently had a stroke, but I don't know if that's related to...
She was in Ice Castles.
Yes. But anyway, I don't think the stroke was caused by Watcher in the Woods, but the film, you know, is a very powerful one and was released by Disney as a kind of ghost story, etc., around the same time as Something Wicked This Way Comes, with people with signs on their hands and stuff like this. It's a very, you know, pivotal time for Lynch and Frost. And I just think that if only we could go back to those days when Lynch, you know, had his VHS player set up with little Jennifer Lynch running around, you know, Watcher in the Woods would feature predominantly in terms of his research for the future venture he made about 7 years later called Twin Peaks, originally Northwest Passage, of course.
We'll say that. So, well, Lawson JP, he writes that Leland had been a vehicle for Bob for so long that it is difficult to know where one ends and the other begins. And I agree, because the way it's set up in the show is that Bob is possessing Leland and can take over at any time, whereas what Fire Walk With Me introduced is that Cooper was split and his doppelganger got out, which indicates that the doppelganger, because of the way he was acting in his room at the end of the series, that he doesn't quite understand the world or how to behave in the world. That's why he's like doing the thing with the toothpaste and plunging his head into the mirror. You know, Leland didn't really do that kind of stuff. So it shows that.
No, I think that's more like the menacing side of Bob, but with Cooper, it's coming out in this sort of a ridiculous fashion where, you know, he's playing around like a kid. It's not the same as Leyland. Maybe it's because he's just almost been born in Cooper at that point, and it takes him a while to adjust to the world. You know, it could take up to 25 years for him to reach full capacity in Cooper or something. I don't know, but I just don't buy the whole idea of Cooper just being possessed, because it just seems too blatant for Lynch and Frost to just go, okay, we're going to make our main protagonist the main antagonist now. You know, because that's like with the fans, isn't it? You know.
Well, do you think that I'm losing my train of thought here?
Well, in the third season, they said they were going to get Bob out of Cooper within a few episodes,
right,
and then it would continue from there. And right, I think it's more about the pursuit of Bob and like the evil influence of the lodge. And that clearly had an impact upon Wyndham Earl. It was like, you know, Cooper was in there, and Windermel's face was just popping up in whose face? Leyland's or someone else's, wasn't it?
Well, I think
it's very strange.
I think something that may get shown in this new series, we may get a flashback to Pearl Lakes and Bob getting into Leland. They may touch on that.
I wouldn't mind flashbacks as long as they're done in a, you know, a pretty brief manner and things like this. It really made me wonder whether, like, the Jim Belushi and Robert Nepper characters really would be set in the past almost. They say, like, Las Vegas around the time when they were testing these nuclear bombs and stuff like this. And, you know, Engels and Lynch came up with this idea of the Black Lodge being created, or maybe, I don't know, kind of distorted or deformed into what it is by these nuclear tests, which is an absolutely, well, it's Ronnie Rocket level bizarre, isn't it? But, I mean, I think many fans would probably have liked Lynch to have had a hand in this book and put some of that stuff in it. And so the new series will feature, whether it will feature that level of out-and-out weirdness that's just...
Well, you know how, like, we've talked...
You know, you can't really say that's not realistic. You just go, oh, okay, all right.
I think, and that's another aspect of the book that I wasn't too keen on, is the fact that it didn't have any Lynch influence into it.
Maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. I mean, like, even though, we love Fire Walk with Me and stuff like that, sometimes we criticize it because of the fact that Frost wasn't involved, and there seems to be kind of sometimes an off balance. With this book, I would say the same thing. I can see aspects of the book that people would like. I just think that it tips too much into Frost, and the best of them is when they come together, especially in this world of Twin Peaks, because we see what happens when one of them takes over.
Well, we're very lucky in that respect then, and the new show should be kind of that melding of their two talents. But when it comes into just discussions of UFOs, I'm with Debbie and other people. I'm just not really that keen on that kind of stuff. It's like, I mean, maybe if I saw a flying disc or whatever, I'd probably be fascinated.
But even when the leaked pages came out, you were just kind of thrown, because over in England, you guys aren't really taught about Lewis and Clark and all that. So it's kind of like this.
Well, I don't know. There could be an aspect of it's all alien to me, literally. So I just kind of go, okay, this is all just one big mystery, And so I wasn't expecting. My expectations were not quite up where yours were, because when it's like with the entire mystery, even I didn't really expect that much in a way from the deleted scenes from Fire Walk with Me, but the level of just bizarreness in them was good enough for me. Like, obviously, like, the repeating of animal life, etc. I mean, we clearly found that pretty funny or disturbing enough to.
No, I think it's funny and
turn it into a running joke.
It's kind of just out of place in that whole scene. You can see why that moment was cut out. A lot of people in the chat seem to think that Paris.
I think it was just shortened, really. I don't know. I don't think that animal life is out of place.
The shot.
You've got to admit, that is a really hilarious topic to discuss, though, Cameron. Whether Calvin Lockhart saying animal life was just too much for Lynch, and he was like, "No, I'm going to dial it back."
No, I didn't. Well, it's like just showing the guy with the beard and the glasses. It's just some of the shots didn't fit the tone of the rest of it. But people in the chat seem to be convinced that the White Lodge is going to be Paris.
I think maybe Lynch thought it was getting too wacky, as well. And the stuff in the White Lodge could be Paris, maybe. Because Lynch really loves Paris and always says he loves it so much and all this kind of thing, and
right.
He was there with Carl McLaughlin and his wife, Kyle's wife, and all this kind of thing. It's understandable that they might film something there, and the idea of Cooper being in Paris, I mean, it's kind of stuff that many fans would sort of be praying for in a way, isn't it?
Semper Callis says that most Brits are very familiar with Americana, so I guess you just aren't that well versed in it, James.
Americana? He's presumably an American, right? He's from the US, but I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, obviously I know about UFOs. I've heard of Area 51, that kind of thing. But I wouldn't say that's exactly Americana. That's not like Coca-Cola signs and Harley Davidsons and Route 66, is it? It's more But I think the stuff to do with Lewis and Clark, I mean, that was genuinely news to me. We were never taught anything about that in school. It never comes up in our media. Stuff to do with Jack Parsons, I'd never heard of this guy even. Really, I mean, maybe I'd heard of the name actually, but Lewis and Clark, I'd only heard of those from. Made me think of Superman, of course.
Lois and Clark. It's what I said in my statement review or whatever. Whatever my feelings about this book, I don't think it translates at all to the new series, because everything I've seen so far from this new series has been spot on tonally with what we all want and feel. And I'm curious.
Well, we haven't actually seen anything from the new
series. No, but what I'm saying though is the care in which these teasers have been made, the tone.
Oh yeah, but I don't think Lynch would go for any, like Frost saying, like, let's devote a whole episode to some character getting abducted by a UFO and stuff. I mean, because that's just like dime a dozen. You can find these, straight to video films still now, extraterrestrial or whatever they're called, and alien abduction. It's just, I mean, yeah, of course, these things are, I'm not saying that I completely don't believe in any of these things, but I'm not sure what angle Frost is coming at, but that in a new show of Twin Peaks, character was, anally probed. I'm not sure if the audience would be really up for that.
He's gonna be.
James Hurley has to rescue him. So.
He's gonna be probed because of his comments during Firewalk with Me, when he referred to Mark Frost's input as UFO shit.
And to find the skeleton of, because the FBI obviously controls all of these UFOs or whatever's big conspiracies going on, and made them shoot JFK or something.
Well, see, and the whole thing about UFOs, I thought, was even debunked in the series, because when Major Briggs starts talking to Cooper about the signs from outer space and stuff, like Cooper, and then he later says, "Yeah, we were told outer space, but those came from the woods." So that eliminated the whole thing of UFOs and became solely about the Black Lodge.
I think if any aspect of UFOs is believable or to be taken seriously, it's when people are writing stuff about something did crash somewhere at one point in the Nevada desert or whatever. These stories is, and that's kind of the point of the book, is where does the truth begin? And it gets into Mulder and Scully, and so
which somebody tweeted to Frost saying, "Are you trying to take over the X-Files?" And he was like, "No." But I can understand someone's reasoning for asking that, especially
apparently in the new X-Files that was on recently, that's many people criticized a lot. At one point, Scully says, "I heard something about reverse talking or backwards talking," and huge people, and they were thinking, and giants as well, and they were thinking, "Oh, that's a clear reference to Twin Peaks." These things, were not invented by Twin Peaks. Obviously, giants or reverse talking. So the idea of people backwards manufacturing UFOs and all that business, and that's where microwaves were invented from, for instance. That kind of thing is probably could explain all of the business of people seeing, UFOs and stuff. It's just the military designing things and testing them out, maybe, flying microwaves or something, or You can just imagine James Hurley in a UFO, really. I think that would be a good way for the show to go.
Well, I still think that the burnt engine oil has to do with, James Hurley being the salvation that we all need, and that he is the key to getting Cooper out of the Black Lodge.
But you don't think that the James commandeering like a UFO that was made with sort of like all Harley Davidson add-ons and stuff, and then it lands in the middle of Glastonbury Grove, causing the oil scorched hole in the middle. That would be quite something.
Yeah, I agree.
Imagine that, if James Hurley just landed at the end of the series and then out popped Michael J. Anderson completely nude, as an ET sort of thing.
Yeah.
Doing backwards talk.
And then he just, revs it up, and it's like Fire Walk with Me, and he shoots it out kind of like Crater Face does at the in Greece, with the fire coming out of the car, and just launches.
Yeah, I mean, and he's got the, and just as little Mike Anderson comes out of the you know, the craft sporting, you know, a 15-inch erect penis. You know, it could be like Nymphomaniac Part 2 or something. Let's rock! And it's like, down, 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 down. And then Cooper puts his thumbs up and goes, aces.
Andrew Dow in the comments says, he thinks Cooper was trying to kill himself when he realized Bob was in him, and that's why he smashed his head. I don't think so, because he wouldn't be still talking about brushing his teeth, and he wouldn't have like laid down on the ground in the missing pieces trying to fake that he had gotten hurt. I mean, obviously,
I think it makes sense in terms of the last thing he did inside Leyland was smash Leyland's head into the door. But then Bob surely knows that smashing his head into a mirror is not likely to kill him. So it's like he's just repeating things, which is a common thing in Twin Peaks, you know. And Arthur Knockimson says that, you know, the squirting out of the toothpaste is like, you know, semen expended and sort of, so it's like Cooper's potency that he has, all that potency, and what we loved about him, of energetic and enthusiastic. It's like Bob is just squeezing it all out of him, which is a kind of real evil in a way, far more than just.
Well, remember, Cooper doesn't want to talk about trees anymore. He wants to bed.
I think Bob was already nestled inside him, telling him he didn't want to speak about trees, and he's just getting too into the whole Annie thing, setting Annie up for a fall when it seems obvious, like if Annie's going to be in this competition and probably win, why the hell does Cooper do it? It's just.
I mean, it is. I mean, I love Annie Blackburn, but it always makes me laugh that, you know, Cooper had this romantic sex scene with like an ex-suicidal nun.
Yeah, but you can see there is a thing of them, the fact that they do. Yeah, I mean, it gives this sort of darker tone. It does come in underneath the door in a way. It feels, you know, like there's something dark there with Annie. And
yeah,
but the thing is, like about also Cooper has his own dark background as well, which is kind of hidden beneath this.
The first time we
first
time we get any hint of it is in the shooting range in season 1. When they're, you know, talking about, he's talking about how he got hurt by a woman.
Yeah, he's very excitable, and like, I mean, even from the pilot episode though, he's so excited at looking at Fleshworld and things like that. He's like almost gleaming with just happiness there. When in fact he's looking at a dismal magazine, sort of, as he says, you know, sort of preying on the weaknesses of people. In a further episode, and it's just, he's got a very strange aspect to him though, Cooper. You can't deny that, you know, as an FBI agent, he's a very strange mixture of just like extreme goodness, and then under that there's all these bad experiences that he had with.
Well, that's why for a few years after Fire Walk with Me, when people would ask me, you know, kind of to sum up Twin Peaks, I wouldn't even mention Laura Palmer. I would say it seemed like the show was about Cooper going from innocence to corruption, which is something that Lynch has explored often with even Kyle MacLachlan and Blue Velvet. So,
I think Cooper was corrupted almost in a way before the show began, but it's like it's more just a question of how it's revealed. You know, it's almost like the Black Lodge is just working its way into Cooper somehow. You know, a strange force in the woods or something.
Andrew in the comments says, Cooper says in the pilot, when he's looking at Fleshworld, look, a page is marked, and thereby is showing that he enjoyed exploring the darker side. I think he was just excitable by just delving deeper into like a mystery.
Yeah, but you've got to admit it is a slightly odd way for he's got this very childlike kind of glee about him where. Yeah. Where he literally thinks he's in the FBI story or something, which he says he's got a poster of above his bed in the My Life, My Tapes book, you know, which I really recommend personally. And it's like he genuinely thinks he's in a movie and he's kind of in this new town. And it's the famous thing of, you know, a newcomer comes to a place they don't know, but then grow quickly to love. And, you know, it was so popular, of course, in Twin Peaks, they decided to just blatantly copy it in Northern Exposure in a more light-hearted fashion. And you know, it's obviously it happened before Twin Peaks, and it will happen again. But it was just the perfect character, really, or Cooper coming to Twin Peaks, because we thought that the town was all about like the sort of the darkness in it and what had happened with Laura, which is almost like unspeakably horrific. But he's just sort of there delighting in the pie and things in the midst of all that.
Right.
I mean, it's quite strange behavior, you've got to admit, like for somebody to be just like, wow, this pie is great. Like just after this, you know, he's trying to solve the murder of a 17-year-old girl. So, you know, if people did that in real life, you'd think this person is a bit unhinged. It's like,
well, you know,
I mean, he is a bit unhinged in a way. So,
but people in that profession have to let things roll off them too. Josh.
Oh yeah, I think it's an exaggerated portrayal of that.
Josh in the comments writes, "Do we think that the series opening titles will be reshot for the new series, or just use the old one?" No,
my parents actually asked me that. You know.
Oh really? No,
as if that's like really important. You know,
I think it's going to be new credits, but I think it's going to begin the same. I think it's going to begin with a shot of Robin, but I can't see. They can't really show the sawmill because the sawmill's burned down, especially since it was.
Yeah, but that's very much in the sort of thing that Lynch goes out just taking all his black and white photos of dilapidated factories.
I know, but I'm saying that was in the teaser. You know, they made a point to show the sawmill not there. You know, it's the real location.
Yeah, they could have a quick shot of it just showing that it's now unused and like half of it's gone, isn't it? So
they could, in a way, show the same stuff from the opening credits of the original, but just the modern day version of it. You know, where it's like the same locations, but now things have changed. It's been 25 years later.
What do you think? It's a long opening titles compared to
the pilot is incredibly long,
and then after that, it's not so long actually. It's just
my favorite.
All the shots of the waterfall do seem to go on quite
my favorite part is that Catherine Martell goes from Catherine with a K to Catherine with a C as the series goes on. But in the pilot, it's Catherine with a K.
My favorite thing in the titles and opening titles was the second season opener when it went slightly darker and into this sort of moodier closing shot of the sort of small stream going down. It looks like the stream where you see Bobby and Shelley sat in their car, you know, where they're turning the dial, listening to music and stuff in that episode. And it kind of just sort of, and then the music and everything just goes into this darker, that sort of weird sound effect that sounds a bit like machinery clunking about when the giant's there and stuff. And it just seemed to signal that the show was kind of going into darker territory, you know.
Right.
Which it did overall. And I think, though, that when we're looking at the episodes post Leyland's death and the discovery of Maddie and all that, and finding out Leyland did it, it seemed like they were basically treading water for a long time because, you know, maybe Mark Frost or whoever, they came up with the idea that Cooper was going to be the next one in the sights of Bob and all that kind of thing. It's like they're trying to torment him, or the word you used, what is it? From innocence to
corruption.
Yeah, they're trying to corrupt him in some way and use him. I don't know, but then I don't know. In some way, they were like, maybe Mark Frost was like, no, you know, let's just wait a while and try and bring out all these other stories.
Right.
And so that may, and you know, we'll bring in Wyndham Earl quite quick, but then they didn't do that, and that was sort of the issue.
It was 6 weeks before. Well, no, I mean Earl came in a few episodes later, but the whole Annie thing didn't kick in until 6 episodes later.
Yeah, if Annie had arrived at the same time as when Wyndham Earl arrived, I think that would have been better because then we'd have more Annie episodes as well to kind of feel more engaged with her characters. But kind of as much as I liked her, she didn't feel like.
I mean, John Justice Wheeler was in. Let's see, 5.
He arrived before Annie.
Yeah. He was in like 11 episodes, and Annie was only in the last 6. So, All right, James. So before we go,
Justice Wheeler was in 11 episodes. No way.
Yeah, he was, because he shows up in the episode where Josie dies. That's his first episode.
Yeah, I know. I remember. I've seen it recently, and that's one I watched just for the pure power of the closing moments. And it's all those embarrassed moments between him and Audrey.
Let's see.
Overall, I would say the Cooper and Annie kind of romance is more effective than the Audrey and Wheeler thing.
Well, there's a different...
that could have even had an impact on Lynch, I think, because, I mean, I'm sure he watched those shows when he was like, flying off in a plane. I don't like this.
Well, no, come on. There's a big difference between, betting Sherilyn Fenn as Audrey Horne and taking off on a plane, leaving her on the airport strip with Pete Martell, than Cooper risking life and limb to save the woman he loves and the new Miss Twin Peaks. Don't you forget that, Mark Frost. Annie Blackburn won Miss Twin Peaks. All right, go ahead.
I'm sure he knows that, but I think that he's making some kind of weird joke where somebody said, "Oh, what is it?" Maybe he's talking about the fact that Annie was injured and came back from the Black Lodge, obviously in the woods, and so because she was injured, she couldn't be given the winning, result, the first prize, right? Mm-hmm. Because did they even award it to her? They gave it to her. They put the crown on her head. They were giving her the flowers. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, somebody wrote that, maybe they had to kind of annul that and say, we've got to give it to Lana instead because Annie's in the hospital. And I was like, bloody hell, that's a bit like, cruel.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, Annie. Taken to the Black Lodge and, had all blood put all over you and stuff. But, anyway, sorry, you've not won. We're giving it to Lana now.
All right. Well, okay, James. Well, before we go, let's do concluding thoughts about the book and where we are with Twin Peaks right now. Go ahead.
Well, I will just say that the book has added a certain curiosity for me, and it's pretty mysterious to the extent of I feel like I've got to go through the whole thing with a sort of, very finely and just fine-tooth comb and all that. It's just, it doesn't really make me any less excited for the new show. It actually increases that. So therefore, I feel like the book coming out has been a good thing, and I do look forward to the volume 2.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about the new series? Any more thoughts about as it's coming along?
I can't really say a lot in terms of what the actual series will be like in terms of the way it looks and the sort of story or soundtrack, all these kind of things. I think that I will be massively excited about the new soundtrack. I hope that comes out before the show, but.
Oh, I'm sure it will, because Fire Walk With Me soundtrack came out before the movie. Philippe...
Yeah, but did the series one come out before season 1? I'm not sure.
No, because they didn't know it was going to be successful. Philippe in the comments, have to point this out for all you guys watching at home. He writes, the term Moonchild was mentioned earlier. Laura was born on July 22nd. Moonchild refers to someone of the Cancer zodiac sign. No coincidences here. I agree. Sounds pretty plausible. So, all right. Now,
it's a Watcher in the Woods reference because, the moon features heavily in that, or at least an eclipse does. So, you can the circles and things like this. So, yeah. Just look for the Watcher in the Woods reference at the end of this book. Watch that film.
As for myself, I can't wait for this new series. Everything that I'm seeing from it looks fantastic, looks great. There are aspects of this book, Secret History of Twin Peaks, that I found interesting. But overall, I felt that the book was just a giant waste of time. For me, I didn't like it. I wasn't overly intrigued by it all. I thought a lot of it went nowhere. I think it is a lot of much ado about nothing. I think it's a lot of Mark Frost's interest crammed into a Twin Peaks brand to just get more people talking, when a lot of this ultimately is probably going to be, it's not going to pay off really. If it does, yeah, obviously it will make the book more interesting as a read. Although for me, I think its greatest sin is that it's just uninteresting. It's boring, and I feel like it's lifeless. It's not something that I wanted to dislike. It is what it is, and I was just kind of bummed by it. And I felt that there was more. When people saw Fire Walk with Me, people thought, well, Lynch, why are you going back to Laura Palmer? There's so much more you could have done with the story. I feel like Frost, with 350 pages, could have explored a lot more things that I feel like would be relevant. If he wanted to explore this fully, I feel like the book should have just been Major Briggs's Project Blue Book files and just be done with it like that. But like I said, can't wait for the new show. But just this book, I'm not a fan. I'm not going to disparage people if they like it, but I really do feel like if you do really enjoy it, it's because it says Twin Peaks, it's canon, it's Mark Frost, so you're excited just to have something new. But if this was just Joe Blow writing a Twin Peaks book, you guys would be tearing him apart for all the discrepancies. And I'm curious if hopefully those are like purposeful discrepancies, but if they are, again, I feel like that's kind of trolling the fans too. It's like making us buy a book of stuff that's not even real, not necessarily happen. It's all convoluted. And what's the point? What's the point of wasting my time reading a whole book that's not even telling me anything that's factual? Or I don't know.
I mean, come on, Cameron. The whole series was not factual, was it? So
yes, but but I'm saying there is an established timeline, and parts of this book completely negate some of that. So who knows where we're going? If we're going to be dealing with alternate timelines and parallel universes, I have no idea. I do know that I can't wait to see the new show. Can't wait to see more stuff that comes out about it. Hopefully it will enlighten this book a bit better. But just my initial feelings on this book is I'm just not happy with it, and that's just the way it is. But anyway, don't want to end it on a downer. I really appreciate all you guys in the chat room and watching this podcast. We did just like a huge 3-hour one today talking about the book. It's just a real pleasure doing these live things with you, even though sometimes we do have audio and video problems. Thank you so much for sticking with us and just kind of watching and experiencing the show with us. We couldn't do it without you. So anyway, thank you very much for watching, everybody, and we will see you next time. Take care.